All right, Lisa, are we just about ready?
Yep, let me just hit the record button.
Recording in progress.
All right, welcome to the Village of Cottage Grove Village Board of Trustees meeting on Monday, April 6, 2026. This is a virtual only meeting via Zoom with the link at the top of the agenda. You can also watch the meeting on our YouTube channel. It is 6:30, so I'll call the meeting to order. We have a quorum and the agenda was properly posted. I didn't bring my flag tonight, but we're still going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and
to
to
the
the
republic
republic for which it stands, one nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty and
liberty and
justice.
justice for all.
We're on number 4, public appearances. So this is the portion of the meeting where it's the opportunity for community members to share comments or concerns, but this isn't an open dialogue with the village board. So each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. I don't think we'll use an official timer tonight just so we can see everyone's faces as they speak to us. But we ask that you please respect the rights and viewpoints of others. So we're going to begin with individuals who have submitted a request to speak form and are present on the Zoom, and we'll open it to the floor to anyone else in the Zoom call if they would like to speak. So in order to do this, you're going to have to go to the react button and raise your hand, and then we're going to allow you to turn your microphone on. So we do have a few wish to speak forms. The first one that came in was Casey Erlinson.
Thank you. Just quick audio check.
Yep, you're good. Thank you.
Okay, just checking from the last ones. Thank you. So while it's obviously everyone's desire to lower taxes and control costs, that doesn't mean every proposal to do something about them is an effective one. The impact fee is an uncertain gamble for two big reasons. It requires high growth to function, and it only pays in a limited way. If growth in its revenue drops below what the fee collects, we actually lose money in a way we might never recover. The proposed $1,000 fee per unit would require, for example, 7,000 new homes to hit the goal of $7 million. Given that permits for the last 5 years have been between 20 to 50 homes each year, source 2025 development update, the much more likely scenario is that we recover a mere 50,000 each year. Looking at a project like Heyday with 900,000 per year tax revenue, if a single development with less than half that size finds another market, we fail to break even. Actually, it's worse than that because impact fees are a single sum compared to yearly tax revenue. So if we lose out on something, again, half the size of Heyday, we lose 400,000 every year versus the one-time revenue of 400,000 over 8 years. Another even bigger loss that I've yet to see mentioned, the largest driver by far of our property tax is the school district, source 2026 village property tax mailer. These impact fees contribute nothing to close that gap, and again, any growth lost also fails to contribute to school district taxes. That is why I spoke previously about how we lack data to see their effects. The only comparable municipalities with recent safety impact fees are DeForest and McFarland, source their respective public codes. DeForest just implemented their fee in March of 25, so it remains to be seen what effects it will have on their growth, and it is an even smaller 736 per unit. McFarland is more dire with a 2,091 joint safety fee implemented in February 24. Critical to note, however, McFarland's net new construction growth metric was already under 3% in 2021 and has been in steady decline since, with a mere 1.3% in 25, source Wisconsin Department of Revenue. So they barely have any growth to lose and are still missing out. It's clear from the limited data available that while we may be permitted to implement such a fee, the trade-off will almost certainly backfire. Steady, sustainable tax revenue is far less volatile and better supported. Regarding the debt subcommittee, I will only say that it would be extremely redundant and a waste of our actual money to run it. We already have a finance director and administrator, both with expert degrees and certifications, years of experience, and a fiduciary duty to the village. We have an expert consulting firm, unanimously renewed by this board. We have an independent audit, not to mention Standard & Poor's reviews. And finally, we have you, our elected trustees, who should already be diligently reviewing our budget and cost. To think that an ad hoc panel of everyday people with no specialized knowledge are going to find something they all missed is irresponsible. Barring the police station project, our debt is only used for necessary capital projects, source 2026 village property tax mailer. Zero in operating expenses, staffing, or salaries. Nearly half of it is road repairs, second biggest is parks, and Public Works consistently finds the best bids, the most efficient and cost-saving processes, and I've heard them report as such. That leaves this hypothetical group with only one real potential action, deferring road and park maintenance. You can ask staff how well that spirals out in the long term, or just ask residents already complaining about potholes on Dentaria, for example. I urge this board to be proactive instead of reactive. Plan for the big picture, make careful decisions the first time, and don't jeopardize our future just for the appearance of doing something. Thank you.
All right, up next we have Marissa Anders.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. The creation of a debt reduction task force is unnecessary when the village board, finance director, and village administrator are already responsible for financial oversight and accountability. That is the structure in place, and it should be functioning as intended. Adding an outside group to oversee elected officials and experienced village professionals is redundant, inefficient, and an inappropriate use of time and taxpayer resources. If there are concerns about financial direction, they should be addressed within the existing leadership, not outsourced. This approach risks creating distraction instead of solutions. It shifts focus away from the real work and introduces another layer that does little to serve the residents of the village of Cottage Grove. We don't need any more committees. We need leadership, accountability, and the discipline to make informed, data-driven decisions within the framework we already have. If you are serious about serving this community, then it's time to stop adding layers and start doing the job you were entrusted to do, clearly, collaboratively, and without excuses. Thank you.
Right, those were the two Wish to Speaks that are online. I also have a handful that were submitted today. So Stefan Wahe, 100 Quail Parkway, is a village resident, is against the creation of a debt reduction task force, opposes it because we already have the village management and public budgeting processes, thinks that it's redundant and would rather see other strategies toward balanced stewardship of the finances. Melissa Reithmeyer, 406 Michelle Lane, is a village resident, is opposed to the task force, and is writing to acknowledge that while a lot of thought went into the proposal, it isn't necessary, and to accomplish the goals, most of the responsibilities are already outlined in what is done day to day, and it appears to be reassigning responsibilities rather than addressing a gap. And supports continued transparency and financial planning, though. Devin Anders, 312 Fox Circle, is a village resident, is against the creation of the debt reduction task force, stating that we don't need this type of committee in the village, wants to know what departments you're willing to downsize or programs you're going to cut or who you're going to lay off. It's not a manufacturing business. We shouldn't cut services, and it's unnecessary. We already have the appropriate people in place to do that work. Those are I think I have a couple more in my email that just came in. Lisa Swartz is 1002 St. John Street, is a village resident, is voicing opposition to both the law enforcement impact fee and the debt reduction task force. Good intentions, but don't feel it is efficient or worthwhile, as this is a municipality and not a business. And then JP Vicencio, 702 Wheeled Bridge Road, is a Cottage Grove resident, is opposed to 6D and 6E, feels that we have the necessary tools tied to measurable infrastructure systems for water and sewer, but not for the law enforcement impact fee. Would like to better understand the approach to the residential only fee structure that is listed in the memo, and also is writing it's quite a long statement, but the debt reduction committee is opposed to that, and says that we have the proper tools in place already, and includes a long list of citations. Is there anyone else on the Zoom call that would like to speak? We just ask that you raise your hand using the function at the bottom of your Zoom. Lisa, do you see anyone?
I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay. With that, we're going to move on to number 5, discuss and consider the minutes of the village board meeting on March 18th, 2026. Those meetings are linked as a PDF in the agenda.
Cindy, I would move approval of the meeting minutes as presented with one modification under the public citizens that spoke. Both Michelle and Kevin Steffens, I believe their last name is spelled with E-N-S instead of A.
I'll second.
All right, there's a motion by Severson and a second by Murphy to approve with one small correction. Any other discussion on the meeting minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. We're going to move on to number 6, unfinished business. So first up is a Lindstrom Acres development concept presentation. This is for feedback only from the board. So I think Steve and Brian, if we can let them speak.
Thank you. Yeah, this is Brian. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can. Thank you.
Thanks. So we asked to put this on. We appreciate it in order to provide an update and seek some feedback on what might be the next steps. And I just want to start by saying I see that the Bannigans appear to be on the call, and I want to say thank you to them publicly. In their willingness to get together with us, talk through their concerns, and as a result, I think it's fair to report that we've reached an agreement on the major deal points that allows both of us to move forward in a manner that's cooperative and productive. So appreciate their willingness to do that. And if they want to add anything to the conversation, I'll leave that up to them. But beyond that, we with that in mind, we acknowledge that they have a unique parcel surrounded by 120 developable acres that was part of the comprehensive plan of a development within the village of Cottage Grove. So there are a couple of options that we're seeking some feedback on in terms of annexation parcels and annexation sequence. So one of them, option A, as provided, was a smaller annexation to initiate the process, and that area was selected because of its proximity to the gravity sewer area of the development. It does not kind of open the area immediately. That would plan for the park, that would plan for the a lift station that would serve this general area. And then there's option B, which is a larger annexation, which does allow for more master planning of the park, of the stormwater, of the lift station area, and as well, in our pending agreement with the Bannigans, a path that we can plan out that it gives them, gives more time, to kind of maneuver around them. And I think that's a benefit to everybody. But we're flexible, we're looking for some feedback as to what that might look like before something formal would come forward.
All right, I'll open it up to board members for feedback.
Yes, Pete, I guess I'll go ahead. I mean, I appreciate you kind of mapping out a couple different options. It looks, the first option obviously is pretty straightforward. The second option, you talked about working with the Bannigans. We're still looking at a very small section of the end of Myers Road that's essentially town jurisdiction. So I'm wondering, can you explain a little bit more about where you're at with the Bannigans? And like you said something about you're close to some sort of agreement. What does that agreement look like, or is this reflected in this option too?
Sure, I'll leave the material deal points kind of private in our agreement, but I will say that it allows for a logical path to annexation of all of the Lindstrom property, as well as a future annexation of the Bannigan property in a kind of a sequenced manner, but also gives them the timing and freedom to either take advantage of a guaranteed buyout by us of buying their home from them if they so choose, or to remain in place. So there, that's kind of the gist of it. And then as far as a segment of the right of way, we're understanding and willing to work with the village on how they would approach that. But the conversation was at least put in place that, pending municipal services, the majority of that road within the development would come under the village's control.
Paula, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Question for Rick. I think he's online, our village attorney. In your opinion, does rendering 2 or option 2 meet the Wisconsin rule of reason for annexations?
So that's a good question. I would say yes. The caveat though is because it's unanimous, the rule of reason actually wouldn't apply in this case. Like let's say like the town were to challenge the annexation for some reason. Because it's unanimous, the only like considerations that a court would look at if it were the town challenging is whether or not it's contiguous and contained in the same county as the village. But generally, yes, this is going to be like, let's just say like this was not in that context. Generally, I would say that this is following the rule of reason. It's not an odd shaped annexation. It's not like a balloon on a string, which sometimes people, the courts have said you can't like just have a small corridor that's like 10 feet wide and connect that to some village island that you're creating out in the middle of town territory. So there's a lot of contiguity there. There's a significant border. Honestly, like the shape is, it's not egregious by any means from some of the annexations that I've seen in my time. So generally, I'd say this follows the rule of reason requirements.
Thank you.
Other board members? Heidi, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing these options you've been thinking about forward and working with the Bannigans to find, a mutually beneficial path forward. One thing that I've been thinking about as chair of Parks Committee is, if you were to proceed with the first option, that whole neighborhood, it was sort of planned as it expands. A park would be in the very early phases because that area is kind of underserved. So I think one of the benefits of the second option would be there would be parkland for kind of that whole portion of the village if you were still going to have the park kind of in that more southwestern section of the neighborhood. So I definitely want to prioritize some kind of parkland in the early phases that the whole area would benefit from. So I guess that's my feedback. If you were to proceed with the first option, I definitely want to see some parkland in that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement about the parkland. I was wondering if the village engineer could just weigh in a little bit on the infrastructure needs between the two and lift station capacity.
Yeah. Hi, Cindy. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So yeah, this is Josh. As far as the lift station capacity standpoint, a lot of this development, we may have discussed it before, would all be kind of a temporary lift station. Some of it can flow by gravity back to the existing system to the west, but some of it may have to have a lift station, which would be kind of an interim, in the sense of that if the east side of the Ridge lift station was ever installed to the south, as development took place and headed north, it would pick this area up eventually, sort of thing. So Capacity wise, this is planned into the overall larger reach of that eastern side of the community. In an interim situation, it would probably have to have a portion of it would have to have its own lift station in order to serve and pump back to the west. What was your other question, Cindy? You said, was it about?
It's mostly about utility infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, the water side of it. I mean, as part of some of the infrastructure to the west of it, there's some larger mains that would continue to be looped, but it's a pretty standard system. It would come in and it would be a grid network for streets and utility wise that we would see throughout the community over in that area. So it seems in that case fairly straightforward.
I think everyone's number one question is always about traffic, and obviously that comes at a much later stage in the process.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, if this is a large piece of it, you know, if they were to bring in kind of the smaller concepts a little bit by a little bit, we'd have to kind of look at traffic as it grew. If they were going to do a larger piece of it, we might ask for a traffic impact analysis. It's all really residential development. There's nothing there that overall right off the bat makes me think like, oh my gosh, they're going to generate that much traffic. Residential development is a little different than your commercial side, but yes, it may be some things we want to consider in the future and how it impacts to the west and to the main thoroughfare over on some of the signals and some of the intersections as they get over to Highway N.
Yep, thanks, Josh. Renee has her hand up. Oh, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you for that, Josh. My question really leads off of kind of where you left off, is that the intersection of Vilas Road and access point near Bakken Park, they're already points of interest for traffic safety. So doing a traffic impact study, I think, is important. The other concern that I wanted to bring up is that the Lindstrom project proposes adding up to 800 units to our village. So if we annex these 80 acres without the ordinance of the impact fees, we're essentially asking our current residents to pay for the privilege of having their traffic doubled. And we need to really listen, as was mentioned early on in the conversation, that they have been working with the neighbors, so that's great. But concern about certainly density, and to ensure that, again, growth pays for itself before we really make some solid decisions. Thank you.
Any other trustees with feedback? Pete, do you want to talk?
Yeah, I'm having a little problems with multiple screens here. I'm just looking at the plat, and I guess the question maybe for Josh or maybe Kyla. So the Myers Road access up to the non-annexed Bannigan section, which, boy, it'd sure be cleaner if we annex that, because you don't have a lot of things going on as far as multiple jurisdictions responsible for a roadway. But I think we can overcome that. The question really is going to the south. So from on the south of Myers Road all the way to BB, would that be then maintained by the town? And then once you get to this boundary of the annexed property, then the cul-de-sac would be under village maintenance? I'm not quite clear how that would work.
Pete, forgive me. This is Josh. I'm only on my phone tonight, so I'm a little access wise and share wise is a little hard for me. I'm not sure if Kyla's on. But as far as like, yeah, what would be in the town and what would be in the village, those would have to be agreements and discussed. I think, you know, a portion of that would still be township road as it headed to BB, like you're saying, right? There would only be potentially a cul-de-sac, or the upper portion of that would be village, unless a bigger piece was incorporated in as part of this. And Rick and Kyla might have to answer to that. But I know Kyla has some arrangements in a few other spots, Pete, where there's like some of this that goes on where, hey, we'll take care of, we'll maintain, we'll plow, sort of thing. But I don't know if those details have been worked out.
So the way it's referenced on the conceptual plat is we've got Myers Road ghosted in. I guess the question maybe to Brian would be, would the roads, and I forgive me, I can't remember what the way it was laid out before, but would the Myers Road, any of the properties or the plot, the lots tied in, would Myers Road be serviceable then from village roads from either the north or the west, so that there would kind of be this boundary between town and village, and there wouldn't need to be this cross boundary service?
Yes, so I guess we didn't re-provide
Yeah.
the original concept, but Myers Road would no longer be a dead-end cul-de-sac. It would connect into other village network of road structure. And like Josh mentioned, there are, often neighboring municipalities come to certain agreements when municipal boundaries kind of cut across the road as to who maintains what and what transition point. Those are all to be determined in kind of future developers agreements, I think, as far as I would guess. But yes, but to answer the other question, it'll all be connected, and the road network will make sense, and not just be left standing.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And then Brian, while you're on, can you just clarify, this is about a 250 unit subdivision, correct?
Yes, about 250 is what we're proposed in the original concept.
Okay. Heidi, you had your hand up before.
Thank you. The one question I had was sort of answered in that road conversation. The other question I have is, I guess, following up on that 250, about how long do you think would you estimate? I know it's hard to tell with the market, the housing market, how fast absorption will be, but about how long do you expect the build out of that to take?
Of course, yeah. Hard to always predict, but that is the business we're in. So 250 all single family homes is what we've proposed for sale. And my best estimate would be build out of about 8 years. Give her 30 to 40 a year would be probably the most, the fastest pace. I think it's very reasonable to kind of pencil out about 30 a year.
Thank you.
If I could just make a quick comment on the road question that Pete had. So basically, the cul-de-sac, I guess, that exists now all the way to that southern sort of like boundary line of the parcel. So that would all be in the village, right? I don't think we would ask or require that they bring in the whole road that extends all the way to BB. I would just have a little concern about just sort of that little remnant, I guess. But I mean, typically for something like that, municipalities will enter into like some sort of road maintenance agreement just to cover that, especially where it's a dead end road. Well, it's a dead end road right now, but it's basically like one little portion is going to be in the town. In all likelihood, they're not going to want to maintain it. And they would probably ask the village to snowplow it, would be my guess. But yeah, typically some sort of road maintenance agreement would make sense. But because there's other connectivity, it may concerns there might be lessened. But we can certainly have that conversation with the town if this were to move forward.
Any final feedback from any of the trustees or from staff? All right, well, Brian and Steve, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you all for your feedback. We appreciate the time.
All right, we're going to move on to discuss and consider a request from the Monona Grove School District for approval of the site plan amendment for an addition of a paved bus loop around CGS. So there's a long list of attachments in the agenda, and there's a couple of new ones, which includes the presentation for tonight. And then also we had solicited trustee questions, and the superintendent, Dr. Frederick, is on tonight, and she provided us with written answers, but is also here to kind of walk us through the site plan. So
Yeah,
are you able to share your screen for your presentation?
Yes, I am. First of all, thanks for allowing us to be here. I'm Tanya Frederick, the superintendent of Monona Grove School District. Did prepare a couple documents. I shouldn't have said I could share because now it's not letting me share.
You should be able to share, Tanya.
I think that because I'm not logged in our system, it's blocking me. Let me try one more time. Otherwise, Lisa, I might ask you to pop them up. I apologize. It's not letting me. I should have tried earlier. Lisa, is there any way that you could open that very first one, the slide deck? I'm sorry.
Yep, I just asked Inga if she could get that up, so we'll work on that for you.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Well, in the meantime, my understanding is that the last meeting there were some questions related to some of the operational aspects by the school district. So I am joined by Anna Blake and Bill Miller are back with you tonight to answer some of those more technical questions. But I wanted to talk a little bit about, obviously, as we're doubling enrollment at that site, it does require some physical changes to the physical plan, but then also procedural changes as we're moving forward. And so lots of people on the call have either had kids at that building or in the past or currently, so kind of have a vision of how it's worked. Obviously, we have to make some strategic changes to that so that we can accommodate. So wanted to walk through some of those things that are kind of more the operational parts. And then as we move through that, any technical questions that you have for Bill or Anna around the site plan. Thank you, Inga. Yeah, if you just want to roll it forward to the second slide. Great. So some of the things that we'll talk about tonight are some of the start and end time changes, and also the exit and entry process, and then any questions that you have about the site plan. So multi-layer approach, anytime we do anything around safety, it's, how do we layer on multiple things because we want to have, reinforce as much as possible. How can we keep things safe? So as I said, we have an infrastructural change with the physical loop and then also some procedural changes. Obviously, our number one goal is to eliminate any of those unmonitored times of kids coming and going into school, and then also to fragment cars versus pedestrians versus buses when we think about those transit zones. And then also, obviously the physical design is one thing, but the safety part of it really comes down to our staff and the practices and policies that we have in place to move forward with this. So a couple of different things around how do we separate students and vehicles. So we'll walk through a couple of places where there's some perimeter permanent fencing that is put in place. I think now people envision we're going to have a bus drive through the playground, which is not the plan. That lower playground that people think about will have a fence between that and the bus lane. In addition, there's gates on each end of that bus loop that would mark it that it is for bus and emergency vehicles only. And those gates would be open for drop off and pickup. Other than that, those gates would be closed on both ends of those loops. And I know there was a question around a retaining wall that would sit on the south side where there would be a guardrail, playground fence, driveway, another guardrail fence, and then retaining wall. So we can walk through that too, because I know there was a question there. And so hopefully walk you through what that looks like will be helpful. So in the morning, one of the things that has been a past practice and not a great one is that kids gather on the playground before staff is on site. And so there's a chunk of time that is unmonitored of students because staff hasn't even started their workday yet. So as we move forward into next year, 7:25 support staff would arrive. 7:30 is when we would say that's when our doors open and we take possession of kids. At that time, that's also when the gates would open for the buses. And from 7:30 to 7:45 is that soft start because our bell rings at 7:45 for the start of the school day. So that 15-minute window to accept kids in. Coming into the classroom, they wouldn't be on any of the playgrounds because the playgrounds would be closed because the bus is coming through. And then we would get that morning off to a start. So pedestrian traffic, would come right to the front door, car traffic to the front of that circle, and then obviously bus traffic to the back to come into the back of the building. Again, the controlled access, really being able to have those exit and entrance loops stopped. In the middle of the day, we would have the 4K buses, midday routes, would come to the front of the building because we do want that traffic loop closed during the school day to prevent, any cars coming through there. Obviously, it would only be used for emergency vehicles during that time, not to be considered a public shortcut for any reason. Afternoon, kind of backwards process, 2:35, we would close the playground and then open those gates. 2:45 is dismissal. And so kind of working it backwards, playgrounds will close, those loop would be opened, car traffic would be coming in. We use that double lot because we can queue many cars off of the road, and then the buses can line up to the back. And then 2:45 dismissal, and then after everybody's cleared, then those gates can be closed again. And that allows for, as we talked about, we do have rep care and after school Y care there. Again, there will be a fence on that lower playground to keep it from that route, but as another layer of protection, but being able to have that for community use as well as those other entities. And then there was a question about the loop versus the cul-de-sac. We were able to have a very large meeting with all of our emergency services and the city, as well as the engineers. And it was really determined that that loop around the school is a much safer perspective for emergency and EMS vehicles. And the other thing is to separate the bus traffic from the student traffic, and being able to have that gate restriction and then the perimeter fencing. All of the fencing would have visual transparency so you can see through it because we still want to have that sight line. And then again, thinking about that infrastructure paired with any of our procedures. And then if you want to click open that map, Inga, this is a scaled back version of the map that has many of the technical things taken off of it because I think it's easy to get lost in, all of the different components of the grading and those different things. So wanted to be able to show that so we could talk through a few of those things. So starting on the north at the top of the map, that is where the buses would enter. Oh, wait, sorry. Bill, is that right? That's the...
Yes, they would enter from the north.
Yeah, okay. My arrows are a little dark there. So gate would be opened entering from the north. There is a fence that would be between that loop on the north and where the cars come in the other direction. So fence in between there. Buses would come looping around. They would line up. Kids would exit about the middle of the back of the building and then come around and exit on the south end. And if you can see there at the bottom of the map to the south, that small playground on the bottom, that would be fenced in from the time of the curve all the way to the other section of the building. And then there would be, on the other side of that would then be the guardrail, fence and retaining wall. And then the buses would exit out the other end. And then, as I said, in the middle of the day for those 4K routes, I think there's 2 that pick up and 2 that drop off. They would come right into the front so that we can continue to leave that playground closed. So that is what we prepared as far as walking through what will entry and exit to the building and kind of changes to staffing with the morning and having kids come directly into the building when we take responsibility of them starting at 7:30.
Thank you, Tanya. Josh, do you think you could just give us a brief overview of, because you hadn't had a chance to complete your engineer report at the last meeting?
Yeah, and just seeing kind of what they have proposed here, I think it addresses a lot of our, when it was kind of engineers talking and Kyla and her staff and Aaron talking with their staff, you know, separating on the northern entrance, now separating it just to be the bus loop. And then having just kind of the car loop to the south and having the bus loop on its own, gated on both ends, like the superintendent mentioned. And then having a sidewalk connection on the north. I saw that on this new exhibit. Having a little bit of two-way traffic as they come in, going north-south into the lots. I think they've addressed a lot of our comments initially. I think as always in all the staff, we have minor recommendations and they come back for final plans with a little bit of ADA access and some connectivity. But overall, this is kind of, from my first glance, really kind of captures what some of those conversations that we had with them earlier. So on the transportation and kind of access wise side of it, it looks very clean. So.
All right, open it up to trustee comments and questions. Chris, you have your hand up.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay. First of all, I apologize if you have answered this question. I have kids in the background who do not want to get ready for bed, so I may have missed it. But the permanent fence from the lower playground to the upper playground, so does that mean that there's going to be no way to get from the lower playground to the upper playground?
No, so the fence that comes around on the lower playground will be, let's see, west of that loop. And then there's a gate that you would go through to get to the upper playground.
Oh, okay. Okay. And the gate will be closed at drop-off times or drop-off pickup?
Yeah, a couple different gates. I think we're talking about what are the gates that are at the end of the loop, right, from the streets. And then there's the internal fencing that you think about, that lower playground where the littles all go. How do that be fenced in? And then in order to go from that lower playground to the upper playground, it would be a pedestrian gate.
Okay. Okay. That does make me feel better about this loop.
Yeah.
The fences on the end, are those going to be like locked with a key? And emergency services are going to have keys for that, or is it just going to be like closed and they can, you know, bust through it with their vehicle if they need to in case of an emergency?
At this point, that what it would be. We're thinking the manual ones.
Okay, that's all I have. I definitely feel a lot better with the fence there, separating the playgrounds. So, something we really need to get done. My daughter's going to be going to that school next year, so I know we're on a tight time crunch. So, yeah, I don't have anything else at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Anyone else have questions? Pete, go ahead.
Tanya, thanks for walking us through and working towards solutions to some of the questions we had. I guess as I look at the layout you showed us, you have the eastern playground, and in the morning, if there's older kids that walk to school and they go play in that playground, how do we? You mentioned closing the playground. How do we manage that so that those kids that come early aren't there, and then there's this cross traffic that could potentially happen when they're trying to get in the building and the buses are still maybe in the aisleway?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we have to think about is really making sure that our families are clear about when there are staff on site. I think one of the things I've come to realize is, you know, because right now those are first and second graders that are at that building, and they, you know, some kids are unsupervised there at that point. At 7:25, obviously there will be staff that come in. Some are stationed in the back. One of their jobs will be to clear that playground. And then obviously we'll have to begin to have some conversations. We don't want kids walking to school through that back playground. We want them to go to the sidewalk and come up to the front. It's going to take us a little bit of time, and it's probably going to take us a little bit of retraining and thinking about route into school. But I have to say the majority of our kids are so little that parents are very heavily involved.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, it's just those exceptions. So you're saying that
Yep.
you'll have staff involved with working on that because,
Yep.
obviously, if it can, it will. It's a matter of when. Okay.
Exactly. Yep.
So the other question I had was, prior to all the reconfiguration in school, what was the peak enrollment at Cottage Grove Elementary back several years ago? What was that peak at, and how does it compare to where we're at?
I can't speak to that. It's not full. It'll be at like 80%. I do believe before Granite Ridge was built and they reconfigured, it was pretty full, and there was some trailer classrooms, I think. Before my time, Pete, I wouldn't want to answer
Sure.
that question.
No problem.
I'm
No problem.
happy to send you an email.
No, I was just sort of curious as it relates to kind of the surge. I mean, enrollment went down and then we're back up, and now we've got, all sorts of infrastructure issues. But I guess the other question I had was kind of revolves around the first one. So there will be kids that walk to school, and you've got a really good plan with timelines, but a lot of times that timeline per the minute's not going to align. So how do we keep kids that arrive early that walk from going towards the back of the school? Or will they be able to get to the small playground that's behind the fence? Or how do you envision that handling?
We would expect them to come up to the front, and they would wait. First of all, we don't want parents to be bringing their kids unsupervised before 7:30, right? We're going to have to work hard at that, and then work with the families that are trying to do an additional plan. The kids are going to have to come into the front and wait on that sidewalk before the vestibule.
So walkers will enter the front.
Yes, everyone. Yes, the
will there
only people that come in the back would be those buses.
Okay, and so those fences that are on the end of the loop,
Yep.
is there more barriers to prevent pedestrians from actually walking back there if they come early, just in terms of a control?
No, there's not. It's going to have to be human control and signage, right? Where it's like buses and emergency vehicles only. There's not any walkway, and so it is road. I know it is path. So that is something in our back to school video of how to approach school is going to have to be clear. And again, I mean, it's gonna take time.
Gotcha. And then the last question I had was on the car queuing, looking at the document that you shared, and we've talked about this before. There's an expectation of 134 drop-offs, give or take, based on a lot of the assumptions that have been done, correct? That's what was in the memo. So if there's 71 cars on site, that leaves 63 potentially, and they're all not going to come at once, but 63 cars queued up, having to come from the south, would actually extend towards through the intersection at Taylor. Now, again, they're not all going to come at once, but if it did, it would, and it would cause some traffic issues. So I guess the one thing that I would ask is, there's a lot of people that live on the north side, and if everything has to come from the south, is there a traffic plan that shows where they should go, where they make a U-turn, what neighborhoods they would go through if they're coming from the north side of town and they need to come up and enter this process from the south?
Yeah, I know when we had originally sat down with the municipalities, there had been lots of different ideas about mapping that out for families to show that as part of the back to school. Here's kind of what we're looking at. So that will be something that's going to have to get penciled out.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I kind of feel like that's really important, right? Because we've had a lot of issues with that Taylor and intersection, and now we're talking about, because of this plan coming from the south, it puts more pressure on there. And I don't know, Josh, if you've done any top line work, but there's going to have to be cars coming to the south and doing a U-turn, or coming down through the neighborhoods and taking a left at the Wheel Bridge and intersection. I mean, I think traffic input or a traffic impact assessment is absolutely critical in terms of the traffic flow that's being proposed to prevent all the neighbors that are east of N on Taylor to be able to get out to work at the same time all this activity is going to be going on.
Yeah, and Pete, I haven't done a full level kind of traffic analysis of that overall. I've looked at the stuff that they've proposed, and I agree with you. I mean, I had that comment early on in some of the reviews of, there's going to be people coming from the north that are going to have to take an alternative route, right? Ollie Street is probably kind of a natural alternative route. A U-turn somewhere to the south if they're heading down N and don't take Ollie is going to be another one. So it will take a little bit of training and teaching And, there'll be some queuing and some understanding of how that takes place. The one good thing is they do have quite a bit more, the way they have that parking lot laid out, they have quite a bit more space to queue in than they've had in the past.
Is it more than the 71 that was laid out in the memo?
I think they may have a little more now, but I don't know if they're engineers or they could speak to that. I did not look at it since the revisions to see how much extra space they have.
I thought it was in the hundreds.
Yeah, I think it's more than the 70.
15 or something.
The memo said 71, so on the 1.6 million, the option C, it said 71. And I know there was a little bit of work on the traffic flow in that lot, but it showed 71, 134 cars. That's 63 extra that would have to come, and that's going to be about 1,260 feet, which if it all happened at once, and I know it will not all happen at once, but it goes well through the Wheelbridge Taylor intersection at end, which is one of the most challenged intersections that we've got for a number of other reasons.
So I think we did add, we got additional cars into the parking lot because the queuing wraps around that median.
Yep.
And that's how we added so many extra vehicles. That was part of the workshop that happened at Plan Commission and
Yep.
the meeting.
Yeah, Bill or Anna, can you address that question?
And then Renee and then Heidi, I see both of you. Go ahead.
So right now, in our current layout, we have queuing for approximately 34 cars. We would be bumping up to the 71 that was in that initial proposal. So we'd be essentially doubling, but it did not expand beyond that with our most recent changes. So it'd be sitting at approximately the 71 still.
And then how many cars could go from the entrance of CGS down to the wheeled bridge?
Great question.
Because if that is going to be a problem, like Pete says, we're going to want additional signage, like not blocking the intersection or something there.
From the concept, it was about 34 cars that could stack from the entrance down to Taylor Street.
Right. I mean, a lot of times you'll stack about 20 feet a car, right? It would be kind of an average measurement. And forgive me, Pete, again, I'm on my phone tonight, so I can't gauge that distance.
From the entrance of CGS to Taylor Street, it's 768 feet. So that's like 36 cars.
Yeah.
And we're going to have 63 cars excess. So, I mean, there's going to be some potential for some crazy congestion there. I got a lot of concerns with that unless we've got a real good plan. And you also got all the traffic, and I don't know if we've done that. How many cars would be coming from the north that have to somehow get northbound on N coming from the north side? Are they going to come down N and U-turn in people's driveways? Are they going to come down Ollie Street? I'm not quite clear how that's going to flow. And if they come down Ollie, then you're going to have, this kind of crazy convergence of the cars from Taylor, coming from Wheelbridge, the north traffic, all coming into that intersection.
Renee, do you want to go?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't want to interrupt Pete. So I also had written down my concern for a traffic impact study, I think, for many of the reasons that we've discussed tonight and previously. And I have a second, and this is maybe more of a Josh question. So if I'm looking at this correctly, the retaining wall on the north and residents to that area, and the retaining wall is obviously there to prevent water and for safety, but is there any concern at all with water pooling or in neighboring residents' yards? So that was a question. And so maybe Josh, if you could speak to that.
Renee, you said to the north or the south?
I might have my directions mixed up here. I'm sorry.
So
Yeah,
like
it's to the south.
South, sorry.
And
The other
that's
north. The other north.
Exactly. That's the cemetery.
Okay.
Is what that abuts.
Okay. And okay, so I'm looking at that from, I'm sorry. my mistake, but I just want, yes. So I guess those neighbors won't complain too much. The other question I have was, so there's an exhibit that shows the capacity for 10 buses in a queue. So, you know, I guess what is the outline plan if there's another bus that's delayed, or maybe garbage or pelletary or somebody, one of those larger vehicles, I guess what's the safety traffic plan or protocol for that? And then my last question would be, where's going to be a designated snow storage if this, if there's on-site queuing? So does that mean that there's going to be reduced capacity to the point that traffic will be forced back out into the public roadway? So maybe if you could speak to how that will be handled, because I guess snow in Wisconsin is something we have to think about.
Yeah, as far as the more buses, that loop queues more than 10 buses. You know, they would just be backed up further and wait to drive forward to drop off. You know, in all of this, we are hoping that more people will be willing to put their kids on the bus, because we're no longer crossing between families, between the two buildings. And I know many families had not weren't putting their kids on the bus because of the length of the route and because it was crossing town. And so we are hoping to, you know, we want to eliminate as much car traffic as possible. Bill, do you want to talk to where the snow goes up on that end?
Yes. So obviously that was a concern of mine, being in the facilities department as well. Along the south end where we're going to have the retaining wall, it will be a open guardrail, so to speak. So there would be some passage for snow to go off to the south along that stretch. But the bulk of that would go to the upper athletic fields and to the south of the upper playground. So if you're looking towards the athletic fields, that would be more of a, think of like a gutter system, like a rolled curb, something we're able to push snow off of to keep that away from the sidewalks, where students would be released from the buses and allow us to stack up more during our heavier snowfalls.
Thank you.
Renee, do you have any other questions?
I do not. Thank you.
Heidi, you're next.
Thank you. We've been talking a lot about the Taylor Wheelbridge Main Street intersection, and I think that these are very important updates to make to the site plan. And I don't want to hold that up, because we do have this, you know, this needs to happen. So it's ready for the school year next year. But I would like to send, you know, not just because of the school traffic, and we have made improvements at that intersection with the rapid flashing beacon for pedestrians, but continue to send this back to Public Works to continue to monitor this intersection, kind of make it a priority that we stay on top of, you know, improvements that we need to make in the future. So I guess I would like to see Public Works continue to talk about that and, you know, continue to evaluate and make recommendations up to the board for any other considerations we should have within the total traffic impacts.
Yeah, and Heidi, I wouldn't mind adding to that. I don't know if we fully addressed, Pete, you had some concerns about the traffic side of it. And, you know, it's hard when you come to these traffic impact analysis. You look at them, you see the amount of traffic they're generating, you see the time period over when they're generating that traffic. A lot of times it's on those peak hours, and then the intersection that we've all been talking about, right? It's been the main Taylor Wellbridge intersection for quite a while, based on different types of developments. And you look at, well, okay, it's a two-way stop today. Does it need to be a four-way stop or a signalized intersection? And you got to look at like traffic warrants for a signalized intersection, and the warrants are kind of hard to meet. You know, you need an 8-hour peak or a 4-hour peak or a 1-hour peak or a school special traffic peak with pedestrians and others. But I'll tell you, in a lot of communities, it's really tough around almost all schools because the peaks are so small. They have a hard time meeting the warrants. They're within 15 to 20 minutes, it's chaos, and then it's clear. And everybody always kind of goes back and forth of what's needed, what's not. And I'm not trying to sway people in saying something is needed or something is not, but it may be one of those things that we do need to monitor, as Heidi's saying, and we do need to look at. You know, eliminating parking on that side of the street, obviously, and understanding how people are going to come to and from traffic, and having the district talk to their families and how they drop off and when they drop off, and to see maybe if more people start to ride the bus. It's one of those things that you may have to monitor to truly understand. I'm not going to say it's going to come without a little bit of heartburn at first, but it may be hard even with some traffic analysis at this point to even say that anything else is warranted. You know, I fear they'll go through that and they'll probably say, well, it probably works and it's only 15 minutes in the morning and 15 minutes at night that it's really bad. And it's hard to make a major traffic improvement that impacts the other 23 and a half hours a day based on those 15 minutes. I'm not saying that's a definite that wouldn't happen, that we need to do something, but sometimes it's hard to warrant, if that makes sense.
All right, Chris, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I guess my question is about timeline. Tanya, do you know how long from approval of the site plan it's going to take to go to bid and then construction until it's completed?
If we can get going right now, we will be complete. Our goal is by the 26th of August to have all the cleanup done, because that is open house night.
Okay. Josh, do you know how long a traffic impact study would take?
You know, most of them won't take that long. It's a matter of doing existing traffic counts at some of the intersections, both north and south, and having like a traffic engineer look at the amount of added traffic to that. I would say a month at best, a few weeks if they act pretty fast, but it's something that would have to then be reviewed afterwards as well, and then kind of spoken to at one of these committee levels.
I'm going to let Paula ask her question, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rick to keep us on track with this agenda item.
Did Chris not have follow-up? Okay. So my question actually was going to be for Rick. So let's say, and first of all, Tanya, I want to thank you for the extra work that you all put into this and taking our comments and the fencing, and I think it's gone a long way. So thank you for that. So for Rick, you know, we have a good plan, right, that the school district has put together, but what happens if it doesn't work? Or what happens if it maybe works for a little bit, but then Amazon opens and traffic becomes a bigger concern? What recourse do we have if we approve the site plan to be able to go back retroactively on this decision?
Yeah, so I guess just a couple of things. So once the site plan's approved, I mean, it's approved going forward, but so, you know, as other developments happen and traffic increases, the communities have different strategies, I guess, for how they sometimes address public infrastructure upgrades. So some have a system basically where, you know, you pay for the anticipated future impacts of your development. Others will use like the special assessment process. So, you know, let's say that in the future we determine there needs to be upgrades to that intersection. Any properties that are benefiting from those improvements, you can impose special assessments against those. And what's interesting about special assessments is they're not technically taxes. So they would be, you know, the school would get usually it's not paying taxes, but it would get a special assessment bill if they were found to be, you know, their property is benefiting from intersection upgrades from there. One thing I do want to mention is just to sort of keep in mind of what decision making, you know, discretion we have here. So when we think about like rezoning, that's a legislative decision where we've got sort of a broad array of discretion, and we can impose a lot of sort of requirements on rezoning decisions. Site plan, your discretion is more limited in basically we're looking at this to see, does it comply with all of our ordinances? We're really focusing site specific. So, you know, other intersections and traffic, you know, we are looking at how do we impose conditions on the site plan itself to address that. So if we have a traffic impact study, let's say, I guess Josh, or maybe you would know, but like, let's say it says that we need, like, there's a warrant for upgrading the Taylor Wheeled Bridge Road intersection on N there. I don't know like how that would affect the site plan though. Like how does that, you know, the warrant for the increased intersection, you know, traffic improvements, how does that affect the site plan? I don't know if that would say like there needs to be, you know, better traffic control on the site. And I don't know how, you know, we would impose conditions on trying to improve that, right? And so, but I guess to your point, Paula, that would not be like something we can do retroactively to say we're changing the site plan afterwards.
Thank you. And I know both Renee and Chris mentioned a traffic impact analysis, and you know the idea that it would slow it down by a month. I wonder, you know, from the other trustees, if there is a desire to require that. I think it would probably behoove us to do so, especially if we don't have recourse on the back end. But I'd love feedback on that.
Renee has her hand up. You're still on mute.
I have a question regarding EMS. So I remember the memo that Chief Archibald sent out on, I think it was right around the 1st of March. But I'm thinking, and I could be wrong, so correct me, that his memo pointed out that that was provided early in March, that this was after the initial traffic designs were created. So I'm curious if these current designs have been updated to reflect the fire chief's recommendations. And if not, does that put anybody in any liability position to be not in compliance with fire codes?
Would you like the fire department to weigh in on it?
Yes.
Is there fire department leadership online? I'm not sure.
Anna, that was feedback that you guys got and used, correct?
Yeah, so the feedback we received from fire and EMS was that they needed a 20-foot wide drive lane. So we had updated that, but I believe that was the only comments from that initial review.
I believe that is correct as well.
Hey, this is April from the fire department. Chief Archibald's here too. If you'd like us to comment, we can.
Yeah, can you please provide your opinion?
Yeah, so there's a variety of different requirements related to access roads that we included in that document, and that included width, it included depth, it includes heights, it includes grade. So all of those items were included in that document. So it wasn't just width, it was a variety of different items that would be included in access roads. But I believe Josh and Aaron both went through that and have kind of identified those needs also.
I'm not sure if Chief Lang is on. He might be over at another meeting.
No, I'm here. I'm hoping my headphones work. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we have no specific guidelines for that and would follow what the fire department says with 20 or 24 feet wherever it landed at. And as far as I knew, those adjustments were made through the review process.
I do want to add The in November, when we had kind of our all hands on deck meeting in the very beginning of all this, we did ask Kyla to do a traffic count at Ollie Street, and I think it's Donna Road. And so we do have those traffic counts that I know that she's looked at. We could, again, I think Heidi's suggestion of sending some of these items like the intersection monitoring, maybe those traffic counts, and I would still like to see the no parking during the school drop-off pickup times along end there too. But I think that would be appropriate to send that to Public Works. Those are my comments. Heidi, you have your hand up.
Yep, thank you. I guess I just want to be realistic about the timeline that we're working with and the school's ability. Not that we should rush a decision, because I think we have made a lot of great improvements on this. But I just want to kind of take a step back here, that this school district has made an operational decision to consolidate the schools, move 4K through second grade to Cottage Grove School. This will be happening next school year. So we have a responsibility to make this the safest possible. According to the recent projections that I've seen as of March 16th, we're going from 295 kids at the school to 447. So that's an additional 152 kids, which does sound significant. However, I don't feel that even if every single one of those kids that's moving to the school, 152 cars, I mean, I would be interested to hear Josh's opinion if 152 additional cars is going to make a significant difference in traffic counts. That's going to suddenly require, a signalized intersection or something along those lines. I think that this is probably a more long-term situation to monitor and have Public Works determine what would be the traffic threshold to continue. And as we heard earlier from Rick, that we do have ability to special assess properties that are benefiting from an improvement in an intersection. I think the biggest risk is that we do nothing here, or we don't have it done in time for the school year, and then we're trying to educate people how to access the school once without the project done, and then how to access it after. I think it would be best if we start out on the right foot and monitor this intersection. We can't charge the school for traffic that may or may not result from an Amazon project in the future. I think in my opinion, the best forward would be to make this project be safe for the start of next school year and continue to monitor this intersection through our Public Works Committee and assess as appropriate in the future for any needed improvements.
Are there any final thoughts from any of the other trustees? Pete?
Yeah, I guess, a couple comments. So Josh, you said it's a 15-minute period, periods are short. Totally agree with that, but it's those times of chaos is where the risks go up. And there's a lot of things that we don't know. As I look at the village map and I look at where most of these cars are going to come from, most of them are going to come from the north. There's very few that are going to come up N. So I think some of the requirements, and I don't disagree with some of your comments you made, Heidi. This is an important initiative for the school. I mean, there's some other issues I have with the loop, but that really the safety elements I'm going to leave to Tanya and her team. But I do think that no parking lane is absolutely critical. So I would say in terms of what we do with Public Works, because if you've got cars stopped on and queued up, 30 cars, we can't stop normal traffic from going up N, particularly with the advent of the opening of Amazon and everybody else trying to get up to the interstate to go to work or whatever the case may be at that time in the morning. We just cannot allow this thing to turn into a traffic nightmare. And that's where I firmly believe that we should have done a traffic impact assessment before we actually make a motion or move on this, just because we owe it to our residents to make sure that we've got good, safe flowing roads. And right now there's a lot of unknowns as it relates to where this traffic goes, where they're supposed to turn around. There isn't a good flow. They're going to come down in, they're going to have to be making a U-turn, which is going to create, other exceptions as it relates to traffic flow. So, I mean, the one thing that I do find, and I don't know, Heidi, if you said it or Cindy, a no parking lane during this period is absolutely critical so that we don't have the type of traffic jam that's just inevitable. My 2 cents.
All right, so I think we've heard quite a bit on this. It is a discuss and consider tonight. If someone can put a motion together.
I would make a motion to approve the request from Nana Grove School District for approval of site plan amendment for the addition of the paved bus loop located at 470 North Main Street with associated improvements within the existing parking lot with staff conditions and the no parking zone during school hours south of the school to the intersection with Taylor.
I'll second.
All right, there's a motion by Murphy and a second by Stoa. Any other discussion here? Chris?
I guess my question here is, could we proceed with the site plan and a traffic impact analysis at the same time and get the results before construction's completed? Because I don't want to delay this, because I know we have a pretty tight timeline. And pushing it back by a month for the traffic impact analysis is not going to help that at all.
Yeah, so I guess to Chris's question, I believe we could impose a condition like that, but I guess the question would be is what's the end result, right? So if we impose the traffic impact analysis, I guess I don't know if it would actually like have site plan suggestions. I mean, likely it's going to be like, if there's any sort of relevance, right, it's going to be the N Taylor Wheelbridge Road intersection. So like as far as like imposing conditions on that, I mean, that
Rick,
is yes.
Maybe, I mean, let me throw out the scenario.
Right.
I looked at the DOT traffic numbers for N, and in 2015 there were 7,500 vehicles on N. They put out strips. They put them out for a week or two, every 2 to 5 years. They put them out again last summer in 2025. There's 7,300 vehicles, so there really hasn't been that many growth, and it's pretty steady over the last 10 years on N, right at the school, almost right at the school. When you look at their traffic maps, you can look at it online. Let's say we do a traffic impact analysis, and it shows that 70. I agree with Pete. There's going to be more people that go down Ollie or other places and have to loop around and come back up through that intersection. Maybe it's not 152 extra students. Maybe it's half of that because some are riding the bus. Let's say it's somewhere between 70 and 150 extra trips over that peak period. Usually a peak period, when you look at traffic numbers of that 7,300 vehicles that are going past that school during the day, usually an hour peak period is around 10% of that, so 700. And let's say you're contributing another 70 to 150, 10% to 20% more. Let's say the TIA comes back and says, you know, it doesn't need a signal, but it's close to a signal. I mean, is a school district going to have to pay $300,000 for a signal, or are they going to come back and say, hey, we're producing 10 to 20% more traffic, and is the village going to kick in the other percentage of that because it's not our traffic? Usually that's the same thing the developer does. And I guess everybody's under that understanding. That comes back to Rick. What's the commitment? You know, how much traffic are they contributing to an intersection, right? Of, you know, is the village then ready to move forward with it, or is it all in the school district? I think they would need to know that moving into a potential signalized intersection that could cost them, I'm just spitballing, $300,000. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Because I don't think we could require the school district to cover the whole cost, right? Because we're just talking about a site plan amendment. So really we're focusing on the site layout that they're proposing.
Right. They may change traffic impacts, but it's probably not going to be more than 10% during a peak hour, likely. You know, just my gut take on what I'm seeing on traffic numbers here.
Yeah, but today, Josh, we've got traffic from the north, traffic from the south entering the site. And the proposed, the site layout and the site plan is forcing all the traffic that enters that site to come from the south. So that's a little bit of an amplifier to the numbers you're throwing at, and it adds directional change on vehicle traffic, which I don't have a flavor for it. I just feel we owe to our residents and the people that use these roads coming through here that we don't create a 15-minute train wreck every morning. And it's that's my concern. And I know we need to move quickly in order to support the school district, but not having a good handle on some of these questions on traffic is very concerning.
No, I don't disagree with you, Pete. I mean, it was one of my first comments that you can see in some of my correspondence back was, what kind of traffic information does the district have and where is it going, right? So I'm not disagreeing with you on that.
There is a motion and a second. Does not include a traffic impact analysis, but it does include some other staff direction. Are there any amendments to the motion? Otherwise, we're going to do a roll call vote.
Can we repeat the motion, please?
Sure.
Oh, and Heidi has her hand up. Sorry.
So
I guess before. Oh, sure. Go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry. Motion by Murphy to approve the request as indicated on the agenda with staff conditions and no parking zone during school hours south of the school to Taylor intersection.
Go ahead, Heidi.
I would be willing to add a traffic impact analysis to that motion if the board feels that's a strong I don't want to hold up the approval because I do think that these improvements would make the site significantly more safe for access for this coming school year, which is not that many months away. And so I don't think that we should hold up the site plan, and it sounds like we can't require, that offsite because it's a site plan approval. Is that right, Rick? We can't require those offsite improvements, but understanding that traffic could be important. And if that's something the board feels important, I could amend my motion to include that as well.
Yeah, I don't know if we could necessarily require the offsite improvements just because we're amending an existing site plan. I mean, if we were talking about a rezone or something along those lines, we can certainly evaluate it, I suppose, but it's not something that would typically be included in like a site plan approval.
Sure, but the information, we could require the traffic impact analysis, and then that would help inform us later if we want to do an assessment to the properties. Is that kind of
correct? I think that would be the way to do it, to kind of recover those costs in the future.
Sure. Well, then I would.
Oh, can I just ask about the traffic impacts? Is it appropriate to do it before the changes are made, or would it be more appropriate for us to, because you're dealing with human behavior here. We need to know how everyone changes their routines come September 1st, and then see how that, changes the traffic in that area before we start going down the road of making additional changes. Understanding that we don't want there to be upfront issues with that intersection, but I think we're going to have to extrapolate data, and is that worth doing that now versus getting real data in the future?
I think that doing the traffic impact analysis now is a wise move. It sets the parameters that we have right now. I do believe that we will have to do monitoring, and that's something that, as many of you have mentioned, Public Works can do after. And so we can take traffic counts after. Once school opens, we can do it, repeat it again once Amazon opens. But I think to be proactive and set a baseline, we do the traffic impact analysis now. So I would support that, Heidi, if you add that to your motion.
Heidi, add it to the motion?
Yep, I would add that to the motion.
Chris, will you second that? All right. There's a motion and a second amended. Would you like it read back to you? All right, roll call vote, please, Lisa.
Benzo,
Aye.
Dahl,
Aye.
Kel Nelson,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Severson,
Aye.
Stoa,
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thank you, Tanya and Bill and Anna for being on tonight. All right, we're going to move on to presentation regarding the village's S&P Global Ratings Report for 2026 note issuance. 2 documents listed in the agenda. I'll turn it over to Cameron and Greg from Ellers.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm actually going to let Greg take the presentation on this, and then we'll both be available for any follow-up questions.
Thanks, Cameron. Just share my screen and bring up one of the primary documents and put it in your packet. This is an overview of the Cottage Grove rating with Standard & Poor's. A copy of the full rating report was included in the sale day report from the village's most recent debt issuance. Just an overview of the village's rating. The village's rating is AA stable. The village has had the same rating since 2017. It's a very strong and favorable rating. The way the rating scale works with S&P is you start with AAA, then you go to AA plus, then you're at AA. So the village is 2 notches from the highest possible rating, which is AAA. The credit strengths, which S&P notes in their credit report, these have been consistent over time, is strong reserves or fund balance. The village has had very good reserve levels consistently, and also the village has good consistent budget performance, typically ends the year favorably with revenues exceeding expenditures. And then these are S&P's words: sophisticated financial management framework and proactive policies. So the village has completed an annual financial management plan since 2016, which looks at capital improvement plans over a multi-year period and projects out the village's operating budget over that same planning period to kind of look at the overall tax levy and impact for the village's operating budget and capital budgets. Those are provided annually to S&P. And they view that as a very strong management practice and attribute that as one of the main credit strengths of the village. So that's been noted over several years as part of the main credit strengths of the village. The primary credit weakness that they identify in the report is kind of the gradually increasing elevated debt burden over the past few years, largely due to increased infrastructure investment and facility expenditures. So they do note that as the primary weakness. As far as upside, downside potential, this is kind of S&P's assessment at a high general level in terms of what could move the rating up, what could move the rating down. Just want to say there's never one factor that's going to move a rating up or move a rating down, or one metric that's going to tip the scales. There's a broad methodology that I'll speak to in a moment that S&P uses to determine their ratings. But as far as moving the rating up, some factors they did cite were if income metrics within the village aligned with higher rated peers. That's really not only a statewide comparison, but also a national comparison, but also a factor that the village doesn't have a lot of direct control over. And then if the reserve levels were materially higher, they don't define, a specific number or a percentage of revenues or expenditures that they deem materially higher, but it would have to be a substantial, improvement in reserves over the current levels. What could move the rating down lower is if the reserves deteriorate substantially or debt burden becomes highly elevated. Same comment on the upside factors. On the downside factors, they don't define what is a significant deterioration in reserves or what a debt burden becomes highly elevated. But these are just general trends or factors that they would consider along with others in terms of movement in the village's rating. But again, the village has had the same rating since 2017. So how is the rating determined? S&P has a local government rating methodology that they apply nationwide. Similar to other rating agencies like Moody's, they have a detailed credit methodology that they use to kind of help determine their ratings. The rating criteria from S&P has 5 kind of general factors: economy, financial performance, reserve, management, and then debt liabilities. They assign a 20% factor to each of those, and then kind of assign kind of a quantitative metric of 1 to 6. 1, the lower, the better in terms of those metrics. So each of those rating factors have kind of primary anchor factors that they evaluate in that methodology, and then they have sub-factors that they evaluate to kind of determine those scores. And again, it's important to note that when S&P is doing this comparison, they're not just comparing the village to communities in Wisconsin or communities in the Madison metro area. This is a rating methodology that they apply nationwide. So they have certain data points and metrics that they use uniformly across their rating methodology, so they have a consistent analytical tool to evaluate communities nationwide. So those quantitative metrics that they cite in their report and use to do their analysis, they compile a variety of sources, some of them from the village directly in terms of audited financial statements, other data sources in terms of demographics, and other broader economic metrics. They're citing from nationwide sources that they consistently reference in their report. So they're very adamant as far as their data sources, because again, they have to apply their criteria nationwide. So in terms of the process, there's always a rating analyst that is assigned to each credit. And typically there's 2 analysts that are assigned. The village has been fortunate that for the past couple of years, the rating analysts have been fairly consistent year over year. The village can't request a particular rating analyst. We can't request a particular rating analyst. That's entirely determined by S&P. And they kind of obtain to do the initial quantitative analysis, and they have initial dialogue with staff to kind of get other input on financial information, economic development trends, policies, things of that nature. We participate in a lot of rating calls at Ellers throughout the state. In my opinion, the village has built up substantial credibility with S&P over the years. To evidence that, this past spring, when we were doing the rating prior to the most recent debt issuance, the village has had an annual rating in the past several years. S&P just did the initial outreach and information gathering through a Q&A done entirely via email. That's not typical, but that shows the confidence, consistency that the village has demonstrated over the years, that they just viewed it as a regular update to their process because they can see consistently the village's financial performance has remained strong year over year. So, that's credit to the village over the years in terms of, having that consistent performance. So once the rating analyst kind of completes their analysis and obtains their information from the village, they take it to an internal committee, the rating agency, which can consist of other analysts and others familiar with local government nationwide, and that committee assigns the rating. So that's standard for how all the rating agencies determine their rating. It's not done just by the analysts, it's done by a broader committee. So in terms of the village's rating history, as I mentioned, the village has been in the debt market annually going back for the past 4 years. The village didn't issue any debt in 2021. So there's been an annual process that the village has gone through. Really, the rating reports have remained very consistent. The village's strengths and weaknesses really are quite similar going back over the past several years. If I have to pick one characteristic or trait that the rating agencies look for when they're doing rating assessments, is consistency. That's what they like. They like to see things consistent. They like to see forward-looking projections, and that decisions are well documented. And all of those things the village has been able to demonstrate for many years. For the past several years, potential borrowing for municipal facilities was first discussed with S&P in 2024. That was based off of the fact that the annual financial management plan first started factoring in extensive village facilities that would require borrowing beginning in the fall of 2023. So, the first major financing here kind of took place, recently with the police station. And, this has really been shown to them for several years. They could see that this was part of an annual process that not only was looking at capital over a multi-year period, but also was looking at operations. So this wasn't something that was done in a vacuum. It's something that we've been talking to them about for several years. Obviously, the police station with this particular borrowing kind of was a large borrowing, the village's largest borrowing that it's undertaken in recent years. So they knew that that direct debt burden was going to increase as a result of those facilities. They knew it's been part of a long-term plan discussed for several years. Bottom line, this was not a surprise to them. We had documentation going back over multiple years that showed that this was coming. This was being planned. It was being timed in conjunction with the closure of the village's largest TIF district. It was all something that could be shown, that was being presented, discussed well before it occurred. And that's really what the advantage to the long-range planning is, that these things can be shown. There was never any, promise or commitment that the village was going to do any of these projects, but we could demonstrate that it was part of discussions, part of capital improvement planning. We didn't just drop a large facility on them on a rating call and say, hey, we decided to do this project. They knew about this several years in advance. And that really is what kind of plays into, again, the long-range planning that they cite in their report. So in all, the village's credit rating with S&P is very strong. The credit strengths that have been documented, particularly fund balance, budgetary performance, and planning, have remained consistent. The elevated debt burden has been noted, but that was expected and anticipated, kind of based off of capital plans that S&P had been seeing for several years. And so certainly that, stability and that rating, translates in terms of the market interest rates that the village receives on not only existing debt but going forward. And again, with this rating, even factoring in a larger debt issuance, maintain the village's AA stable rating, which is a very solid rating. I mean, that's a tribute to many years of good financial work by village boards and village staff to really put the village in that position. So that's kind of a high-level overview of kind of the rating factors that S&P looks at, specifically how the credit profile has been consistently communicated from S&P for the village. And happy to answer additional questions, or certainly if staff has things they want to add, can certainly do that as well.
Yeah, Cameron, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just a couple of things. So just kind of a reminder, a critical part of the discussion today is going to be the pre-sale report. Previously, we presented a little bit of an more elevated overall general obligation burden. With the new report, with the final sale result, which included some premium on sale, we kind of cap out at that $46,936,794 of general obligation debt, or 48.8%. Following the next year, that jumps down to 41.52%, and the year after that, 35.89%. So just kind of wanting to paint the picture there that we're kind of returning back to below historical norms from a debt capacity perspective. In addition, a lot of what you can find on DOR, when we're comparing community, only includes general obligation debt. And again, what is presented in the packet is, and the percentage of limit is only general obligation debt. And so we need to make sure that we also are including revenue debt when we're kind of looking at overall debt burden. And really the only difference is how the debt is pledged to be repaid. So revenue debt is pledged on future revenues or user fees, whereas geo debt should, all else fail, be pledged on behalf of the full faith of the taxpayers. So sometimes there's some strategy when the water and sewer utility are taking on projects Oftentimes it's cheaper for the village from an interest rate perspective to take general obligation debt because the market views that debt as less risky because it's pledged on the full faith of the taxpayer, the property taxpayers in the village. So that's where when I take a look at the village of DeForest is a good example. They may have a slightly less geo debt, but significantly more revenue debt. Whereas when I'm looking at Windsor, for example, which is another growing community, much more comparable geo debt, but they also, because they have similar levels of revenue debt. But that's all I had for this discussion point. And kick it back to you, Cindy.
Okay. All right, I'll open it up for comments and questions from board members. So Paula's got her hand up first.
Thank you, Cindy. And thank you, Greg, for the presentation. Cameron, I'm glad that you added that in and that our that we've had some cost savings in this debt so that our projected debt is only a little over 46 million instead of 48. So I appreciate your hard work on that and do appreciate that, the strengths listed in there are a direct result of our staff's work. So that's fabulous. Question for Greg. So it noted that rating strengths and weaknesses remain consistent for the past several years. So how do we address, or what needs to happen to have the debt be removed as a weakness and even potentially move us to a AA+ rating?
So when over the past couple years, as some of the debt issuances have been, a little higher as more infrastructure and the facilities here came online, S&P kind of noted that debt burden was becoming elevated. Even going back when it wasn't as elevated as they're noting now in their reports, the village was still at a AA stable rating, again, going back to 2017. And so, if the debt burden is reduced, I don't want to say that's necessarily going to result in a change in the rating one way or the other, only because the rating didn't change even when the debt became more elevated. It's kind of gets back to those 5 factors that they look at, and singling out one of those factors, it's going to really move the rating one way or the other. As I wish it was that simple, it unfortunately just isn't in terms of how S&P kind of does that methodology. So, I mean, I think it's holistically kind of looking at everything in terms of, how that rating is going to be impacted. So even if the debt burden becomes less elevated, if there's going to be all these other holistic factors still go into the picture in terms of whether or not the rating moves upward or moves downward.
But it is a piece of the pie, right?
Yeah,
as well
it's
as
it's a piece of the pie. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Chris, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Renee, you have your hand up first. It's in the light bulb, and so I have a hard time seeing it. And you're still muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you. And thank you, Greg, again for walking us through this. So I have several comments and a couple of questions. So I guess I just want to underscore too that the most significant hidden concern in this report is the explicit listing of elevated debt burden as a persistent weakness. The infrastructure impact, and this debt is directly tied to increased infrastructure and facility expenditures. I just really want, again, to point out, too, that when we're looking at revenue versus debt, the village certainly is growing, but it really appears to me that the debt is currently outpacing the rate, which income metrics align with higher rated peers. I want to point out too that the downside scenario risk of this is that the S&P has issued a clear warning regarding the future of this rating. So the rating could be lowered if reserves, fund balance deteriorate, as we mentioned, or if the debt burden becomes more elevated or highly elevated. So a cumulative effect, if I'm understanding what I'm speaking to is that because the village debt is definitely and currently in a phase of facility planning and potential borrowing, every new expenditure adds to the cumulative total that the S&P monitors. So if the total debt service begins to significantly squeeze our annual operating budget, the AA rating could be downgraded. So I want, if you could speak to that and clarify, and then I have a couple more comments I'd like to make.
The one thing I want to clarify is when they talk about, what can move the rating upward and what can move the rating downward, upside, downside, one's not more severe or more positive than the other. They're not warning any more of a downgrade than they're advising of the potential of an upgrade. They're just general factors that they're citing that could move the rating one way or the other. So I don't put any more strength in the downside than I do the upside. They're just general statements that they're identifying that could, result in changes to the rating. So, that being said, I mean, it's, the debt burden along with everything else, all those other 5 factors that are make up the rating criteria, everything kind of gets evaluated. I think the main thing that, and I've said this before, that, I think the village should continue doing is the long range planning that you have done consistently since 2016. That is not something most communities are doing on an annual basis. Certainly not many communities that have a 10-year track record of doing it. So I don't want that to be lost in kind of this as well. I mean, I think the main reason the rating's been able to remain stable despite changes in debt profile, but all these other factors is, the planning has kind of shown that coming. And so I think, all these things need to be, everything's a piece of the puzzle in terms of how the rating is going to be impacted going forward. So the upside and the downside, they're not weighting one more than they're weighting the other.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch on 2 things quick, Greg. So the first thing to kind of keep in mind in that debt and liabilities is also metrics that we don't have any control over. So one of those factors is the Wisconsin retirement system, that pension liability. They calculate obviously the Wisconsin retirement plan is one of the best funded retirement plans in the state. S&P doesn't look at the assumptions that WRS uses as favorably. So while an actuarially determined liability exists, it's not real cash flow going out the door. Obviously, unless at the end of the year the pension stopped, and there was that existing liability out there. And then secondly, just wanted to make sure we're very clear on the income metrics. That is actual median household income. It has nothing to do with revenue on the village side. So that's where, communities like Maple Bluff and Fitchburg that have highly elevated median incomes, they actually see that as a benefit. And it is something that's actually pretty difficult for us to have any control over from a village perspective. Obviously, you have companies in that bring high paying jobs. That's one way to help. And then kind of lastly, I just want to make sure from a levy perspective and the ability to pay debt service and principal, that's a specific levy adjustment on the work paper. So the incurring debt will never directly reduce the ability to fund operations from our base levy. That is a separate line adjustment on the levy limit work paper. And so, but kind of to that point, when we are kind of working on our annual budgeting process and the FMP, that's why we look very closely on annual tax impact, because debt service certainly has an impact on whether or not taxes are increasing and decreasing, and we look to make sure that the overall tax impact is acceptable to the board and then obviously the community. So, Greg, if you didn't have anything else to add to that, then I want to give Renee kind of the mic back.
Yeah, all right. Okay, thank you, Cameron and Greg. And so, and I might need some more clarification on this, Cameron. You just started to touch on this, but it was another question I had was that debt service versus the operation. So as we continue to issue debt for our municipal facilities, what percentage of our annual tax levy, is now dedicated strictly to our debt services? And how has that percentage changed over the last 5 years? And I looked this up too, and Greg spoke of that in 2021. We didn't have any service debt, and now we're at 48 million.
From a 2021 perspective, we didn't issue any debt. We did have, obviously, in principal and interest payment. GFOA kind of gives a general guideline that roughly 20% of your governmental expenditures, that's kind of like that threshold, that if you're above that threshold, there kind of needs to be a reason for that. So one of those obviously reasons would be those one-time large expenditures. So Amanda will actually be presenting on this on May 4th when she comes to present the audit. We have been between 14 and 17% from a debt service perspective, from an interest payment. So right under that, it wouldn't surprise me for the first year or two under the new debt that we would be slightly above that 20% of governmental expenditures threshold, but something definitely we will want to keep kind of an eye on.
Okay, thank you.
But sorry, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me.
Okay, all right. If you can maybe send those to the board or at some point in time share that, that would be great. So I have another question. So let's just say that we do end up maximizing our borrowing capacity. And so what's our emergency financial cushion? Say we face a unforecasted infrastructure failure, or there's a significant economic downturn that impacts our tax base. So if you could maybe help me process through that thought.
Yeah, I think that I kind of will answer that in kind of a two-part. There's what is the tax will, because if we got to 100% of our debt capacity, I mean, we would be almost 5x what our current taxes are. So we aren't anywhere near our general obligation capacity. We're even after the full borrowing, we're projected to be at 48.88% of our general obligation capacity. As for something happens, that this is why S&P evaluates reserves or liquidity. They want to know if something happens, both from the short term, moderate, and long term, do we have enough reserves in place, capacity in place, and other things to take care of said need? And obviously that there's insurance involved with that. There's general fund. What are our reserves and expenditures as a percentage of expenditures? And so that's why they view it both from a percentage perspective and from a nominal perspective. So sometimes you have a smaller community, they might have 35-40% reserves, but it's only $500,000. Well, $500,000 isn't going to be able to replace a road being washed out or address an intersection that needs to be completed because some major accident happened. So that is why we would likely intentionally dip into fund balance in that respect should an emergency happen. From a utility perspective, there certainly could be, if GO capacity was ever an issue, some communities with electric or communication utilities don't issue GO debt because it would take up far too much of the capacity and not leave enough GO capacity available for infrastructure projects. So kind of when we're looking here 2027 and beyond, we really have, as part of that financial management plan, that $2 to $4 million investment incorporated into kind of what the future spending would be. S&P was given the last capital prioritization and financial management plan to kind of evaluate what those needs would be. So they kind of already know that there is planned future borrowings for or potential future borrowing for projects, all kind of wrapped into their analysis.
Thank you for that, Cameron. But I appreciate that input, and I too just want to, reiterate this, that in 2021 we were at 0. Today we're at 48%, which is, it's enough to raise eyebrows. And I'm curious. So staff obviously are providing the information for the S&P analysis. So are we also including like the full picture of things like declining enrollment trends in the community? And does that affect our S&P rating and in the view of our long-term facility needs and management sophistication?
So a couple of things. In 2021, we were at 38.49% of our debt capacity. So we weren't at nothing. Just wanted to make sure that was out there. As far as enrollment would not likely be tied back to our S&P analysis. That is heavily relied upon on the school district side because it is part of their revenue calculation. I will tell you, kind of in some conversations with the rating agency, they do look at the state of our assets. So if you look at our financial statement footnotes, they would tend to look at a community that has heavily depreciated assets worse than a community like us where most of our infrastructure is relatively new. Because that would be a situation where, yes, you weren't taking on debt, but you also weren't doing road repair and maintenance. So that kind of creates that deferred road and infrastructure liability on work that would essentially be done.
Thank you, Cameron, and thank you for correcting me. I should have said that new debt issued in 2021 was 0. So thank you for pointing that out. No, thank you for pointing that out. And you've answered my questions for the moment, so thank you.
All right, Chris, go ahead.
I have 2 questions. I'm curious about the 2021 debt. Did we not take out any debt because was it COVID funds or was there just nothing that we needed to fix or build?
I started in September of 2022. I believe there were several major projects that were in different stages of improvements. I know there was in 2022 was a significant infrastructure year, major improvements on N, obviously Bakken Park, Wheel Park. So it could have been a pent up of improvements in 1 year that was done over the course of 2 years. We started very lucky community with the growth we have in the base. The formalized, while we always did the financial management plan, the formalized capital prioritization plan was implemented post 2022. And really what that did was really hyper focused on infrastructure, making sure infrastructure needs were taken care of first, and then kind of defining the remaining buckets lower on the prioritization scale. And so when we're kind of lining up projects really heavily focused on Whistler ratings for roadway, kind of state of roadway, and then kind of identifying major projects for the board, because there's just too many projects that there were more projects than funding available. If that makes sense. Chris, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
I can jump in a little bit further, Chris and Cameron. In 2021, there just were not any identified major projects. So there, at that point, we still had our Fund 410, which was a levy funded, cash funded capital fund, and we were able to utilize any capital assets that year through that fund.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, I saw a chart on social media comparing municipalities over the weekend. So I'm just kind of curious, when you're evaluating the strength or vulnerability of the financial situation of a community, is debt per capita a useful measurement?
I think every metric has its place. I mean, if you're looking from a repayment perspective, repayment is done based off of property assessment. So kind of if you're looking at the community as a whole, if 35% of your tax base is commercial, that might disproportionately kind of change the per capita metric, because obviously commercial building isn't attributing to population. So from a purely repayment perspective, I would recommend looking at equalized or assessment. It's also important to kind of note too when that equalized and assessment is. If it's TID, debt, TID, repayment, that's obviously not as big of a concern. If it's TID, if it's non-TID debt, we want to make sure that we're only looking at all the properties that are not within TID boundaries, because ultimately that's going to be the repayment source. So every once in a while, you kind of have a slight delay in bringing on, like, for example, TID 5. Now that TID 5 is coming off, significant property tax relief is kind of on its way to the community. And I guess from a benchmarking and comparing to other communities, it's something that's constantly done. If other communities are doing something well, trust me, those conversations are being had. All the finance directors and treasurers in Dane County and beyond are very open to sharing ideas, opening what's working well, what's not working well, kind of under the levy limit constraint that we're all in. Unfortunately, with the way that the levy limit is structured, it's really forcing communities to take on debt because of the kind of automatic levy limit adjustment that is made. So if you want to enhance or provide additional operating costs to public safety, typically what you see is things that haven't historically been borrowed for are borrowed for, because you can increase your levy by that, and then those funds that are provided that are in the current base of the levy can be released into operating expenses.
Thank you.
All right, any other remaining questions for Greg or Cameron on this agenda item?
Yeah, Greg, I had a question, or Cam. Obviously we're AA stable. We would like to be AA positive rated on our way to AA plus, or even to AAA. Obviously that would reduce the interest rate on our debt, save us interest expense, and get more for our taxpayer dollars. I guess the question for you is, when I look at the S&P report and I look at the strengths and the weaknesses, they point out the weakness is our debt relative to our peers. The statement was debt and liability profile is weaker compared to peers, particularly the debt burden, which is anticipated to worsen based on debt plans over the next 5 years, which is pulled out of our FMP. So when you think about what do we need to do, what should we be doing to try to improve our rating with S&P? And we have a great financial management plan. You talk about the strengths. We do have a lot of strengths, which is attributable to Cam, you, and the rest of the staff. But I guess the question is, when I look at that report and I look at the magnitude, or I look at the weaknesses, that's where we need to focus. Is that correct?
I think that's the weakness that they're citing in the report. But again, if you're to get back to your earlier statement about moving the rating up or moving the rating down, when the debt burden in their report was just not as noted as elevated as it is presently, it was still AA stable. So while that can help your overall credit assessment and profile, I don't want the message to be just because if you reduce your debt burden, your rating is going to move upward. It's just there's not just a single correlating factor that's going to move the rating up or move the rating down. Because
the other question, Cam, you'd said, obviously in the report we're at 48.8% in 2026, $46.9 million dropping to 35 million by 2030. But that's assuming we don't take on any more debt. Is that realistic?
Nope. That is included in our future, our future capital plan. So a couple things. That's why we oftentimes are more aggressive. You know, I think sometimes I get the complaint is, why are you guys using such conservative approach for projects? Because oftentimes we're coming back with projects that are less expensive than originally forecasted. Two reasons. One, S&P sees that we're having realistic budgets. We're meeting or exceeding the forecasting amounts. But two, we can also make sure that we would be better if we're on the lower end of our GO capacity than being on the higher end. If we're constantly 2 to 5% more on each project, that accumulates quickly in an overall GO perspective. One of the problems I have with the term peers is it's peers across the country. So it's also peers that are significantly higher in population. And so for us, it doesn't make sense for us to have 50, 60% reserves, which would probably get us nominally where S&P would feel comfortable increasing our reserves. You know, one thing that I just want to point out, if you look at 25's rating and 26 rating, our debt and liability score actually improved after taking out $15 or $16 million of debt. So that really speaks to some of the actuarial liabilities for deferred maintenance. So they knew this outstanding liabilities of facilities was an issue. So regardless if you spend the money or not, they know that in order to serve a community at the current service level, that the investment has to be made. And so when those numbers continue to come back better, that's where we see those improvements. So that's really what my goal is if we can keep improving those scores, even a couple basis points every year, that will just continue to, you know, potentially get that AA+ status.
So maybe I jumped ahead. Are you going to go through the sale day report, and then we'll have questions on that, or?
Greg, if you want to present that kind of high level, you can. Or if we just want to jump specifically to questions, I don't want to steal any of your thunder.
Well, I mean, I was asking questions on that, and I guess my question, and on table 6, you said we hit $46 million in debt, 46.9 in 2026, and then it drops. And you said we'll hit 35 by 2030. You said that assumes all the incremental debt that we've got forecasted in FMP. I don't see that here.
No, that's not in this particular chart.
Right.
I think the long range plan
that we financial management plan.
Yeah, it's in the financial management.
So when we say it's going to drop to $35 million by 2030, that's assuming we take on no more debt, and that's not realistic. So okay, that answers that question. So I'll let Paula go. I have other questions, but go ahead, Paula.
Just a quick question for Cameron. I know we have a financial management plan. Do we have a formal debt management policy or plan that I haven't seen for the last year I've been on the board? That's just in relation to that, not part of the FMP or.
So we have the capital prioritization guidelines that defines what annually is acceptable by the board to take out on debt. So for 2026 to 2035, knowing that we were going to take out debt for the police station, that was reduced from $6 million annually to $4 million. But part of that $4 million is $1 million annually on road maintenance and $1 million for vehicle maintenance.
Okay. But we don't have a segregated specific plan or policy outside of the capitalization where we just mention that.
So, yeah, and I caution having a plan that says don't exceed 50% of your debt, because that creates an artificial limit that S&P will look at, that you're close to your own internally imposed debt limit.
Yeah, I'm not advocating for any percentage. I'm just asking if we have a plan. You know, City of Fitchburg, City of Sun Prairie, you know, they have those debt management plans or policies. So I was just asking if we had the equivalent. So thank you.
Any other questions from the board or comments?
I guess my only question is, or comment would be, when I look at the sale day report, I'm looking at the comparisons or the summary of the sale. So we borrowed 19.2 million, which includes the GO debt that was taken on for utilities, right? There's an underwriter discount of 222,000, pretty expensive to do it. But the question that I have is, what is the nearly $1 million of reoffering premium? What is that? What do we get for it? Why is it there? Because it's another million on top, another 5% on top of the total debt.
So a reoffering premium, the analogy I always use, it's similar to if you buy a car and the dealer gives you cash back that you can use to lower your loan to purchase that car. But when the underwriter put their bid in for the bonds, they submitted a bid that was higher than the par amount or face value of the bonds being sold. That excess cash or premium gets used in two ways. First, it goes to pay the underwriter's discount. And then second, whatever is remaining from that premium under state law is deposited into the debt service fund and used to pay your interest expense. So that's where that cash back analogy that I mentioned kind of comes into play. So if we look at table 4 in the sale report of that reoffering premium, the money is getting, and this has been the case for the past several years, the village's debt issuances. That money gets deposited into your debt service fund and actually gets used to pay interest expense for each portion of the bond. So the reoffering premium is split proportionally between each of the purposes. So it's money that you will have available to pay some of the interest expense in 2027 and 2028, which reduces what you need to levy to make that interest payment.
So it's not an expense. It's basically cash because they paid more than the face value. So I mean
that's correct.
So at the end of the day, when I look at the principal 19.2 and the total principal and interest of 28.6 million, we're effectively paying $9.4 million in costs, interest and other related costs for this particular initiative.
Yeah, so your net debt service expense is the 28.6 million, which principal and interest less the premium, the cash that you're using to offset some of that interest expense.
9.4 million. Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this agenda item? All right. Thank you, Greg, for being here.
You're welcome.
All right, we have moving on to D, which is discuss and consider the creation of a debt reduction task force, and there's a memo in the packet. Before this discussion item can happen, there were some questions raised about parliamentary procedure, so there needs to be action first to remove the item from the table. And Rick, if you want to jump in, you're still on, and just also clarify and just make sure I said that correctly.
Yeah, so I can't remember if this one had a motion to table as well, but basically, there was a motion to table at the first meeting in March, and to take it to discuss it, we would need a motion to remove it from the table. That is a non-debatable motion, so basically there has to be a motion made, seconded, and then it's a majority vote to remove it from the table, and then the discussion and any action on that item could occur. And that would be the same for the impact fee discussion as well later.
So
I'll make a motion to untable it for open discussion.
Second.
All right, there's a motion by Dahl and a second by Severson. It's non-debatable. Roll call vote.
Benzo.
Okay, can you please clarify that for me? Because I want to make sure I'm fully understanding this before I vote for this.
Yes, so there's a motion to remove it from the table. So we can't actually do anything with this agenda item until it's taken from the table. So the motion right now is to remove it from the table. If this passes, that means the village board can then discuss and take possible action on this item. If the motion fails, it stays on the table and basically we move to the next item.
Okay. I am sorry, my head is swimming. Say that one, Claire, say that to me like I'm in kindergarten. My head is overfill.
Yes, so part of this is just the quirkiness of Robert's rules sometimes. So because at the March meeting, the motion was to table discussion of this item and the impact fee discussion. So when an item is tabled, it stays on the table until there's a motion at either that same meeting or a subsequent meeting to take it off the table. So until you have approval from the board to basically bring this forward again, so it's going to stay on the table. So with the motion and second that Pete, or that was just made, basically, if the motion passes, all that, it's not like taking any action on the item. It's just saying, yes, the village board is taking it from the table so we can discuss this item.
Yes, I would like it to remain so we can continue to have this discussion.
Dahl,
Yeah, not allowing this to be debated is an insult to taxpayers. So aye.
Cal Nelson,
No.
Murphy,
No.
Severson,
Aye.
Stoa,
No.
Oh,
3-3, motion fails.
You
So
should
we're
be
going to move
ashamed.
on then to the next item, which is discuss and consider ordinance 05-2026 impact fees for water and sewer and the law enforcement impact fee. This also needs to be removed from the table.
I moved that we remove ordinance 04-2026 regarding impact fees from the table and approve.
I'll second that.
Motion by Severson and a second by Buenzo. Non-debatable roll call vote.
Benzo,
Continue the discussion, yes.
Dahl,
Aye.
Cal Nelson,
No.
Murphy,
Unbelievable.
Aye.
I'm sorry, was that an aye?
Yes.
Thank you. Severson,
Aye.
Stoa,
No.
All right, motion passes, so it's back on. So we can move on to discussing the impact fees. For
I move approval of the ordinance 04-2026 regarding impact fees.
I'll second the
Second
motion.
it.
That's the agenda item.
There's a motion by Severson and a second by Dahl. Open it up for discussion.
Simply stated, I am moving the approval of the ordinance as it's written, as it's presented by our financial management experts, Ellers.
I'll second that.
There's already a motion and a second. All right, is there any more discussion on it?
So can I just clarify that that's for the approximately $2,100 for a single family home for the law enforcement portion?
The motion was to approve the ordinance as presented, right, Paula?
Correct. Oops.
Yes,
Correct.
and the
And just-
ordinance, the ordinance as drafted includes the sewer, water, and public safety impact fees.
You know, and I would just like to make a comment. The need for a larger police station itself was created by the growth of the community since 2020. That's why it happened. The growth did not pay for itself. The population increased 30% through that time from 2020 to 2025, and it didn't cover the full cost of public safety. In fact, the growth didn't just create the need for a new police station, it also created incremental needs for other departments, including public services, that's going to absorb some of the vacated space in MSB. So, you know, when you think about the law enforcement impact fee, which was proposed on July 7th, which was before the police station was approved, the station was designed to accommodate the growth for the next 15 years. And according to our experts, Ellers, in their report, 52% of that building, or 7.6 million, is space needed because of growth. Because that space now building that space now makes sense instead of adding on every year. But what doesn't make sense is asking existing taxpayers to pay for that growth. On August 18th is when the police station bids and the contract were approved, and unfortunately, the law enforcement impact fee was not completed. The analysis was not completed until recently because it was combined with the water and sewer impact fee assessment. But given the amount of controversy around protecting taxpayers, I personally regret approving the police station before approving this very important impact fee to protect taxpayers. The impact fee framework was recommended by experts, financially by Ellers, and legally by our attorneys. This issue comes down to one simple question. Should existing taxpayers pay for growth, or should growth pay for itself? Voting against the law enforcement impact fee means existing residents and taxpayers will pay for growth.
Heidi, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'd like to call the question.
Roll call.
Well, I guess if we're following Robert's rules, if we're calling the question, there's actually a vote on calling the question to end debate and go to a vote. So it's not just an automatic vote. There'd be a separate vote to call the question.
Lisa.
Benzo? Okay, again, this has been very complex and a lot of back and forth. I want to again ask clarification. What exactly am I being asked to vote for?
Rick, can you explain?
Yes, just give me 1 second. I just have to verify whether the calling the question needs a second. Yeah, so calling the question requires a second. So if there's a motion to call the question, we would have to, or calling the question requires a second. So before we could proceed with that, there would have to be a vote on calling the question.
There's a hand up. I could withdraw my calling of the question.
Withdraw the motion?
Yeah.
Okay. Chris, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the financial experts did not recommend we pass this. They gathered information and said if we wanted to pay for the certain amount that we were able to pay for, this is what we would need to charge. There was no recommendation either way.
That's true, but it is a data-driven analysis.
I think we do have John from Ellers on here if it's helpful to have him clarify his recommendation.
We prepared the calculation of the impact fees as requested. The decision whether or not to adopt an impact fee is a policy decision by the village board.
All right, is there any other comments or questions?
Yes, I have a comment. So I'm going to make a statement. I've thought about this for a while, and given the complexity of what's occurring right now, I want to say that I want to provide an explanation to our current residents regarding my yes vote on the police station. By the time I was sworn in as a trustee, the previous board had already spent over $1 million in architectural and engineering fees. The police station budget had essentially moved to the point of no return even before I had a seat at the table. As a new member, I felt backed into a corner. A no vote would have meant watching $1 million of taxpayer money go up in smoke with absolutely nothing to show for it. Many people also came to the board meeting expressing their support for this project. To avoid that loss, I voted yes, but that vote came with some concerns. In hindsight, I should have voted no, as this project should have had a spending cap put on it from the very beginning instead of leaving it wide open. However, owning my mistake of not voting yes means I will not sit by while watching some continue not to face the fact that we do not have the income to cover everything that is brought before the board. The financial evidence is clear, as Ayler's study proves that over half of this police station is necessitated by new growth. Yet President Cal Nelson and Trustee Murphy continue to oppose these fees along with STOA without providing a single shred of counter evidence. By obstructing these fees, they are choosing to protect developers and salesmen while shifting the entire burden onto the backs of our current residents. We have clear evidence that over half of this project is driven by growth. I want to go on and talk about the wasteful spending that finally addressing the conduct of this board. During our last meeting discussing the village debt, when I was attempting to ask legitimate financial questions about our $48 million debt obligation, I was interrupted and silenced by President Cal Nelson. I was shut down for asking hard questions about this debt, just as the conversation is clearly being backhandedly shut down, although by Robert's rules. I am here to tell you that I will not be silenced again. If we're going to fix the financial trajectory of this village, we have to stop playing these political games and start making the difficult, transparent decisions that our residents deserve. I'm here to tell you that I won't be silenced again. If we're going to fix this disastrous financial trajectory of the village, we've got to stop these games and start making these difficult decisions that are transparent and that our residents deserve. I know I repeated myself, but I'm going to say that. I said it twice. Madam President, your role is to facilitate transparency, not to misuse your power to suppress a trustee's questions. I was elected to ask the hard questions, and I will not be intimidated into silence. Our residents deserve a board that prioritizes fiscal security and sanity. I'm done.
Heidi, you have your hand up?
Yep, thank you. You know, I understand these fees will go to offset the costs. However, if our fees are so high that we deter any commercial or residential growth or investment in our community, the point of having these fees is we'll be shouldering the burden without the growth, where the building has been built to withstand some growth, and we still are expected to need an addition onto this building in the not all that distant future if our growth continues at the rate which it may or may not. It kind of we built it with a little bit of room, but not so large that you know it will last us 50 years, for example. I mean, it may if we don't grow, but setting the fees to this level is going to outpace our peers. It's going to make us not competitive, and losing out on $2,000 worth of fees versus decades of tax base, diversifying our tax base, making our economy more stable, bringing in additional commercial development, which will take pressure off residents. I think I wanted to talk about this to come to a consensus that that would still make us be in a reasonable place, competitive place regionally, because I think that the level the fees are set at will increase our housing to even higher rate. It's already very unattainable for entry-level home buyers, and we're making that even more expensive by implementing this level of fee. And it'll create barriers for small businesses to locate in the village. You know, they know we have a very mobile community. We already drive outside of the village for a lot of our things. And so if the fees are less for a business to open somewhere else, then they're probably going to do that when we would benefit from having that commercial tax base here. So I wanted to open this conversation to come to a point of consensus where we could, you know, come together and find a reasonable rate to charge for a fee, but it seems that we're not going to get there.
Pete.
Whoops. Yeah, two things. The first thing is, Chris, the March 2nd, 2026 presentation on page 7 under the law enforcement impact fee, there it does spell out the recommended fee, and that was from Eller. So that was one. The other thing was when we spoke last time, our fee in lieu of parkland and park fees combined are among the highest in the area. And I know, Cam, you were going to look at that and advise as could we offset some of these fees with that without setting ourselves up for additional levies. Is there any feedback on that?
Yeah, yes, in the packet, there's a document called building permit update. So I was asked last time to add Fitchburg, Verona, Stoughton, and Oregon to the table for single family, with the addition of also adding commercial. I do want to point out, I did have an error in the last page for Wanakee, which both versions of the document is included, the building permit update, and so Wanakee is now corrected to show the correct amount. And then Windsor actually amended their impact fees on March 13th. So as part of this kind of updated process, I went through again all the communities we had and made sure that we had the most updated information to make decisions. And so
in the packet, I have building permit.pdf. I don't have building permit update. So there's another file?
Should be ACN PDF.
Yeah, building permit.pdf. It just has, it looks like the file we had back on March 2nd.
Should be building permit updated PDF. It should be the very first attachment.
And then attachments 2 and 3 are the park and open space plan, and then also the historical document on the parks fees.
I'm sorry. We've got too many agendas open.
So
yeah, but again, I guess that was the question, taking a look at that and the comparables, because we're significantly higher on those two fees than our peers.
Yeah, and one of the things I did add to, and again, I want to give the board information, but I also don't want to overwhelm the board with information. So I did break out Cottage Grove East, Cottage Grove West. I broke out Windsor East, Windsor West, based off of where different fees were charged. Again, trying to make sure all the information is available. So if we're just looking purely at park, let's just kind of take a step back and look at residential homes. So pretty consistent from a fee in lieu of parkland dollar amount. Windsor is a little bit low, just kind of in general for both park improvement and park improvement fee. What I've found in my research is the park improvement amount is kind of different all across the board, which leads me to assume that they're driven based off of specific identifiable projects. So like if we take a look at kind of the general planning for park and park spaces, now that I believe the Houston large park is the next kind of developer driven park outside of areas that would need to be annexed, we would need to put probably a cost to what that would be, and have the board evaluate what percentage do we want to try to recover through the park improvement fee. Also, from just a pure policy perspective, we're kind of talking about what would based off of the levy, essentially what just would come the levy, would we rather collect fees that are used to pay debt service right away, which obviously carries interest costs, or are we okay? And then obviously if we don't collect park fees, that's going to be an additional cost that we'll have to invest at some point. Or do we save up for park fees, kind of like what we've done with Shady Grove and other parks? And that's purely a policy perspective. I did reach out probably later than I should have with getting some feedback, because we did ask the utility commission to provide feedback on the utility impact fees. I have not been able to get feedback yet from the Parks and Rec committee on kind of what a reduction in the fee could mean as far as future park improvements. But I did try to include enough information in the packet for discussion. Oh, you're muted, Pete.
When you look at the combined in lieu and the park fees, I mean, that's over 50% of our total impact fees, which is higher than just about all the other comparable communities other than Stoughton, right?
Correct.
And I do think your recommendation of, saving up for some of these park improvements versus taking on debt's important. And again, if these fees are reduced, then that fund grows slower. I understand that, but certainly it's the fiscally prudent thing to do.
I think always when we're talking about fees, looking at it in the whole always makes sense. So it's a strategic analysis on fees in general. So like, what does it cost to build a home? So it's all kind of push and pull.
Peter, you done?
Yeah, go ahead, Paula.
Am I next in line? Okay. I guess just a comment to Heidi's comment about wanting to try to come to some consensus. I guess I wish that would have been your approach to the last agenda item. When we first discussed this agenda item and the last one at that village board meeting, that was my first board meeting back after surgery. And if you go back and watch the meeting, you can see that I clearly was not feeling well, which is one of the reasons why I tabled. But also we were late into the evening already, and I knew that we couldn't have the rigorous debate that we needed to have on these two agenda items. So in good faith, I made a motion to table. And then in even further good faith, when I emailed Cindy and requested, talked about our last meeting agenda being very long, I agreed with her to postpone these two tabled items to this agenda. I did that in good faith. And while what you did on the last agenda item was legally permissible, it was highly unethical and not in good faith. And so I think not even allowing to have a debate on an item that was brought forward when I said we could postpone it to this meeting, you went back on your word, Cindy. So that being said, regarding this agenda item, if we truly want to make an impact and not have our fees be as high, I would be willing to amend my motion to reduce the park fees to balance out the law enforcement impact fee, the police station impact fee. So if that is the wish and there is a true desire for consensus, I'd be willing to amend my motion.
And I'll resecond that.
There is a motion and a second with is it to reduce the park fees? I think that's not on the Rick, you're gonna have to weigh in on
I didn't make I didn't make that motion. I just suggested it, that if there was a desire to come to some form of consensus, that I'd be willing to amend my motion, and we can take the fees in the entirety. And quite frankly, if it's not allowable, then we take it up again at the next agenda. But if the desire is truly to have balance and to put taxpayers first, this is a good step forward.
Yeah, so just procedurally, so I don't think we could adjust the park fees tonight. If we were to move forward with like some sort of compromise like that, I think with the ordinance could be approved subject to like future board action to reduce the park fees or something along those lines. So that way this would only go into effect if that second condition happens. So that's how I think this could be handled tonight, just not like actually reducing the park fees tonight.
One of the things I just want to make sure, just because I get even confused with building permits and process. So commercial properties do not pay park fees. So I just want that to be part of the discussion, that if we balance it out on the residential, I don't have a lever to pull on the commercial.
Thank you for that clarification, Cameron. I'll just move ahead with my motion as presented.
All right, there is a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion on?
So what is the current motion? Is it back to approving the impact fee ordinance, or is it, I guess I'm confused which motion?
As presented.
Motion by Severson to approve the ordinance 04-2026 as presented.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Benzo?
I want to point out that even a $3,000 impact fee on a new $450,000 home is less than 1%. My vote is yes.
Dahl?
Aye.
Cal Nelson?
No.
Murphy?
No.
Severson?
Aye.
Stoa?
No.
All right, motion fails. If there's no other entertaining of any other motions on this agenda item, we're going to move on to new business. I'll pause here. All right, we're going to move on to number 7. Discuss and consider the special event permit for Madison United Rugby. There's a series of special event permits listed for a bunch of dates, as well as comments from staff. I'm not sure if Brad is on tonight.
Yeah, hi guys. I've been hanging out here. Yeah, so happy to. I think it's pretty straightforward, but happy to field any questions or statements on the 5. I think it's 5 requests.
Brad, is this your list of events in total? I know staff had a couple of comments about some that maybe were on your website, but you didn't submit some special event permits for. I just wanted to make sure that this was a comprehensive list, or maybe more.
Yeah, so I originally had only submitted 2 of the larger ones, and then spoke with Sean and Lisa and a couple others, and we decided it was best to submit all permits that included additional shelter or field use. So all 5 that were submitted are all the events that we operate outside of our enclosed area.
Okay. Comments or questions from village board members, or comments from staff as well? Pete, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question. I know, so there's 5 events here. And the big one is the May 30th event. I think there's 500 participants and 500 spectators, so about 1,000 people. And I think that was the event last year that was problematic. And since then, we've taken action to come up with additional parking, et cetera. I guess my question is to Sean, are there any other events going on during that big event on that weekend of the 30th?
Thanks, Pete. The pickleball tournament is happening on Sunday. Other than that, there's nothing else going on at the park, short of possibly soccer games Saturday morning.
So any concerns, given the incremental amount of parking that we added, given the attendance that we're talking about for this event, having the other event going as well, or do we need to take other actions to make sure that we're adequately and appropriately preparing for the type of traffic and parking we need?
From our perspective, no. The pickleball tournament on Sunday will be coming and going traffic, and with the addition of with the additional parking that'll be available in front of the ball diamond on Grove and Clark, we can get easily 1,000 cars in there if needed.
Okay, so it shows that event is May 30th, which is Saturday. Is it Saturday and Sunday, Brad, or is it just Saturday for the big?
Yeah, and that was what I was going to ask too. We're Saturday and Sunday this coming weekend, but we are only Saturday on the 30th for the big one. So if that's a completely separate day than the pickleball, which I actually maybe didn't even know prior to this, I thought it might have been the same day, but there won't be any problems there.
And Sean, the pickleball is just Sunday.
Nope, it is Saturday and Sunday. When we originally talked about this,
it is both.
Saturday
Okay.
was the question that we brought up before as well, was could we handle everything on that one day?
Right. Yeah. So okay. So that clarified it, but we did talk about that coexisting, and again, through what we tested and set up for those 2, 3, or 4 events last summer to offer that additional parking, I think that we're pretty confident that will make things comfortable. In addition to the additional staffing on that Saturday from our side of things. So, yeah.
So Sean, are the tennis courts going to be open as well? Is there any way for us to like temporarily close the batting cages or do something to limit the activity? Because there's 350 some odd spaces. We've got 1,000 participants for the rugby, and then of course I don't know how many participants you're going to have for pickleball. Is all 8 courts going to be used, or is it partial?
No, it'll be all 8 of the pickleball courts. The tennis courts, those are sporadically used. So I don't think that we would be limiting a lot of traffic in that area if we just close the tennis courts. We could, the batting cage would be open, but again, that is very sporadically used. I don't believe that there's any home talent games or anything scheduled for that weekend either. So there shouldn't be much traffic there.
There's I'm sorry, there's no home talent and there's no Miracle League games scheduled for that weekend of the 30th and 31st.
There is certainly not a Miracle League game. To the best of my knowledge, there is not a home talent game either.
So does hometown just schedule when they want, or is that something that we would need to approve given the amount of activity that's going to be happening at the park?
They submit their game schedule to us once that's been approved by the league or whatever, and then we just plug it in. So I can check on that, Pete, and have an answer for you tomorrow if you'd like to know that for sure.
Yeah, I just think being proactive is important here, given how things went last year. We just want something to be seamless, and we want people to enjoy that weekend in Cottage Grove. So I guess if there's anything that can be done, I think communicating to them that, hey, we're going to have a lot going on. If there's any latitude for them to negotiate with where the game would be that weekend, that if we could avoid Fireman's Park, I think that would be very beneficial to the community.
We did also approve the 5K run from the Monona Grove High School, which is that Saturday morning. Chief Gary. And then I'll get back to you, Heidi, and Pete still has his hand up.
Just gonna throw out there,
The Monona Grove 5K is on Sunday,
Oh, Sunday.
on the 31st. So that does not conflict with this. I have also staffed up. I have a supervisor working that day, plus an additional officer that's going to be focusing on the southern end of the village, particularly that area. So we have it staffed up and are ready for the fun and festivities and the crowd that comes to patronize the village of Cottage Grove.
So the one question I had is I'm looking at the diagram. So for that particular weekend, that area noted as potential as needed overflow parking, I think needs to be planned to be set up.
100%, Pete. We already have that. That is part of the process for sure.
Pete, any more questions? Heidi.
Thank you. Brad, I was wondering, do you need any help with a map or copy of a map to make sure that that's included with participant and spectator information that's sent out or posted about the overflow parking, or do you have something? I know that's relatively new. So
You don't
have
like my MacBook scribbled
well,
overhead
as long
map
as I
from-
have something that the participants can use to figure out where to park, so then they aren't panic parking on Vilas.
Yeah, I think I thought I maybe included one there, but yeah, I usually try to send similar visuals to attendees prior. Whether they listen to me or not is a different story.
No,
but no,
we
always try. And even for the college sevens events this coming weekend, the person who organizes that competition for me has sent the same for this weekend. So yeah, we always try. No, whether they listen is a different story. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for offering. Yeah.
Sean, you had your hand up before. Anything else to add?
Yeah, Pete just pulled up the schedule, and there is a hometown game scheduled for Sunday, the 31st. Nothing on Saturday, the 30th.
Great.
All right. This is a discuss and consider.
I would make the motion to approve the special event permit for Madison United Rugby.
I'll second. Motion by Murphy, second by Kel Nelson. Any other discussion on the special events permits? Do a roll call, please.
Benzo,
Aye.
Dahl,
Aye.
Kel Nelson,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Steverson,
Aye.
Stoa,
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
All right, we're going to move on to reports from village boards, commissions, and committees. The first up is the Law Enforcement Committee with a couple of discuss and considers, and I'll let Chris take over and handle that report.
All right, we met Tuesday, March 24th at 5:30. We approved the minutes. We talked about a bicycle, e-bicycle, e-scooter ordinance proposal, which is a discuss and consider tonight that we can go over in a little bit. We reviewed flock data from January and February 2026. Got an update on the police station project, which broke ground about a week and a half ago. We talked about National Drug Take Back Day on April 25th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. We got the chief's reports and we adjourned. So we have the discuss and consider about the ordinance proposal. Chief, did you want to discuss that at all?
Happy to add in. So the first one is the alarm, and actually I'm going to kick that to Rick because he's done the heavy lift on that, and then I'll go into the bikes, e-bikes, and scooters.
Mm-hmm. Right. So with the false alarm system, I guess this does two things. First, it creates a permit system. So every year, anybody that has an alarm system that directly connects or has like a call that goes out to the village's I don't know what the correct terminology is, chiefs, but basically, if a call goes out for emergency services, then the person has to register that system with the village. So that would be an annual permit that I think the initial permit fee is set at $25. And that's just so that we know who has these systems. And if there continues to be an issue, not only can we cite whether it's a homeowner, we could cite them, but also revoke a permit if need be, if issues persist. So on top of that, we have sort of a revamp of the penalties for false alarms and sort of some clarifications added. So on the false alarm, like if we receive a false signal from any property, we have sort of this stepped progression system with basically you get 2 warnings, a verbal warning, written warning, and then after that, the fine amount increases. We had a meeting between the chiefs of the various departments to talk about, okay, how we're going to keep track of this, what makes sense. Because there was obviously discussion about, do we do it on a calendar year? Do we do it from the date of the first offense? And essentially what we arrived at is kind of a mix, I guess, where if you have at the start of the calendar year, if you had 3 or more violations in the previous calendar year, those will carry forward. So it's kind of a mix, right? So if you had 2 or fewer violations in the previous year, that would get reset at the start of the year. But 3 or more, your progression, your scale, where you are on the scale is going to remain. So if there are any more, so if you're on your 3rd offense and the new year starts, you get a 4th offense right at the start of January, you're going to be charged as the 4th offense. So that's what we arrived at as sort of our way of keeping track of this for the village.
Comments or questions from the Pete? Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess my question revolves around well, 2 things. First of all, I appreciate you guys working on this. I know you've worked on it for a while. I think obviously false alarms are a problem for not only the police department, but also our volunteer fire department. So the first question is, when I look at, I mean, obviously we don't want to fine people. We want people to understand false alarms are troublesome for public safety. So it doesn't really explicitly say that, but part of the permitting process is an education process, right? I mean, so it's not spelled out here. It doesn't need to be, but that's critically important. Okay.
That's correct.
The second thing is, and I do like the existing systems have until December 31st. The one thing is not really clear in here is if I don't get a permit, if I don't have a permitted system, what are the ramifications? It's not clear here.
Right. So there are basically any violation of this would fall under the general, like I forgot what section it is, like the overall code, but any violations of this chapter, we could cite them with a citation of basically failure to get a permit.
It's not. So what are the accountability measures for making sure that happens?
Well, as far as like if somebody installs an alarm system, right, and we don't know about it, they don't get a permit, really the only way we'll know about it is, I don't know if there would be a building permit pulled at some point, or if we get a false signal. I mean, that's really what's going to be
With the way that this ordinance is written, Rick, and I could be wrong, but my interpretation is I don't get a system, I have a false alarm, it goes to the violation and penalties, first alarm, verbal warning, and then on top of that, hey, you need a permit. There's really no penalty to make sure this happens. And I really don't care about the penalty. I care about getting a permit and being educated how important it is that false alarms are a burden on our public safety network.
Yeah. So I guess There would be
Huh?
separate offenses. So one offense would be the false alarm, which first offense you get a warning, but there would also be a citation issued for not having the actual permit that you need. So it's two separate offenses at that point if you
So
don't
is there
have
an,
the system.
is it that covered under a different ordinance? Because it's not covered here as far as any sort of citation for not having a permit.
Yes, there's a general like section 119 or something in the code that basically is our sort of catch-all for violations. I'm just double checking the existing ordinance here.
119?
Section, or it's chapter 1, like section 19 or something along those lines. But I wanted to see if we have a different section in the 106.
General
Yeah,
penalty.
so
Okay, I see it.
yep,
$500 fine. Okay.
Yep. So then there's also a section 106-4 of the existing ordinance, which I don't think we've, or actually, never mind that.
No, I think that does apply, doesn't it?
Yeah. So 106-4, we're amending that to include the violations. We could add a section that just says any person that violates the permit rule is subject to penalties under section 1-19. That's like a clarification.
I think that'd be a good
Yeah.
clarification. It's not that we want to find people. We want them to get a permit and get the education.
Yeah. So I guess what I would say is we add a subsection C under that 106-4, just to say that if you don't have a permit, you'll be subject to that 1-19.
Other comments or questions on the ordinance? I think that's a good change. Otherwise, this is a discuss and consider.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance change 07-2026 regarding false alarms with the addition of a explicit penalty for not having a permit after the dates that are identified.
Second.
A motion by Dahl, second by, I missed it. Someone's got it.
I missed it as well.
Oh,
It was me,
okay.
Paula Severson.
Thanks for clarifying. Roll call vote.
Benzo,
Aye.
Dahl,
Aye.
Cal Nelson,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Severson,
Aye.
Stoa.
Aye.
Right, motion passes. And I just want to add, I think that was a really collaborative effort between all the chiefs and legal and staff. So job well done on bringing that all together. I know it's taken quite a bit. All right, we have the second discuss and consider, which is a recommendation from LEC regarding a e-bicycle and e-scooter ordinance. Chief, if you want to run us through this one too.
So just obviously these are becoming more prevalent modes of transportation throughout the area. This has even been brought up at the Dane County Traffic Safety Committee, and City of Madison and other communities are exploring creating ordinances. So brought this forward to see if the village would like to proceed in creating said ordinance. What you have in front of you as a draft is truly a draft, has not been to legal in any capacity at this time. I know Rick right now is probably shaking his head at me, but trying to see if the village board wants this to be forwarded on to legal for them to craft and draft a ordinance to address these matters.
Heidi, you have your hand up.
Yep, thank you. And I really appreciate the work on this because living next to a middle school, I see a lot of young people on their electric scooters. One question I had was about the class 3 bicycles because they can go up to 28 miles an hour, which is, fast, although many people, or I think that, 28 miles an hour. So a lot of people aren't riding it that fast, especially if they're riding in a crowded area. is there a enforcement mechanism that doesn't require a huge burden for our officers to address like reckless behavior on, if they're driving fast in an unsafe situation, but also, write it so it's enforceable, but not that you have to sit there with a radar to track how fast every bicycle's going that may or may not be electric, because now the batteries are so small, it's hard to tell, when they're traveling quickly.
So some of this language truly came from current state statutes and how they break out the classifications. So that's why it references that way. So that, again, someone goes out and, as it sounds, they purchase a class 3 electric bike and then they go and modify it. And now it's beyond its true classification by manufacturer. So, I truly hope we don't have to take a lot of enforcement action, and it's more an educational component and just the safety factor for the commuters out there.
Okay, thank you. I guess the other question I had was about the commercial aspect and commercial rentals. Because we do have the Glacial Drumlin Trailhead, like I could see that a business may think it's a great idea to rent out bicycles, including electric bicycles. So I guess but also then there's the, scooters you see in some places that just get dumped everywhere. So those are kind of two different sort of business models. So this would require for any type of business model a permitting process. Do we need to lay that out or just reference a permitting process for rentals?
So due to the fact we don't have this type of business right now, that's why things are written the way they are. If we had a business come into the village, then we would need to make the appropriate changes to put things into place so that, one, they could be successful, but two, that we also are addressing any concerns that are arisen. It's hard to write something now for a potential business, in the sense of, again, you referenced the commercial businesses that are out there with the scooters. They have to come in with certain agreements, certain regulatory things that the village board gets to put in place to meet. And if they don't meet that, then they can get their permitting process revoked.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I had just kind of a follow-up on that, and then one other question. So in our ordinance that'll be written out that the village would expressly authorize any kind of agreement with a commercial entity, and then that would be determined, the agreement, at a later date for the ordinance purpose. Okay, super. And then the last question I have is kind of about implementation and timeline. Because we are getting toward the end of the school year and the weather's starting to get nicer, we do have opportunity to catch a lot of kids with, the school resource officer or with the school district before they head out. Do you think that that's a realistic timeline to turn around, that we have something that we can get out to kids to educate them before summer break?
We're already going to be working on education component for whenever this does get finalized and approved. But we're already addressing those things, and they'll be brought up at like May 9th is the bike rodeo. So we'll be talking about it for anybody that participates in that. So they're starting to get that education component and try and capture the school before they head out, and then during summer camps and things like that.
Okay, great. Yeah, and whatever information can get, I'm not sure how they work with the school, but get sent home with students perhaps too, so their parents know kind of the boundaries they need to express to their kids for the summer. I know it's going to be an ongoing educational thing that some kids may need more reminders than others, but I really do appreciate the work on this, because I think anything that we can help create what the rules of the road are for more users is beneficial. So thank you.
Renee. You're still muted.
Gosh, sorry about that. For the fifth time tonight or so. Thank you, Chief Gary, for looking into this and starting this process. So in reading through this, I just noted that there's several safety and legal gaps, especially when we compare it to the strict regulations and the collaborative spirit that we previously noted with the ATV supporters in the village. Um, while Trustee Murphy and President Kelm Nelson historically pushed back against the ATVs despite the high level of regulation for the ATVs, this ordinance for the electric bikes seems to be much more loose. So I have some concerns about supervision. So this current draft allows children as young as 8 to operate a motorized electrical bike and scooters on public roadways with, like was just discussed, adult supervision, which is pretty loose. So supervision definitely is not defined. And, in contrast, an ATV regulations often require specific safety certifications and strict age gating road use. So this current e-bike would allow a 10-year-old on a class 3 e-bike capable of 28 miles an hour, where it was noted that ATVs can't go more than 25 miles an hour. And so you're looking at a 10-year-old on a class 3 bicycle going 28 miles sharing a road with 2,000-pound cars. So the safety issue is that there really is not any requirement for these e-bikes to have any mirrors, turn signals, yet they're expected or given rules by parents, and even as Heidi defined, depends on the parent, that they're expected to navigate traffic, make left-hand turns, yield to oncoming vehicles. And addressing the sidewalk conflict is that this draft would allow these e-bikes on sidewalks unless prohibited by a sign, which also can create a risk for our older adult residents who may not be aware or able to see. So, as you know, obviously an e-bike is going to travel much faster than walking speed. So then I guess that would bring maybe pull Rick into this with the legal issue, is that oftentimes pedestrians, they don't see, they don't hear these e-bikes approaching, especially from behind. So there's, how would this be enforced, as was just brought up a few minutes ago? And there's also a headphone loophole, right? I mean, most kids have headphones on. The ordinance does prohibit headphones in both ears, but technically that would allow an operator to have an earbud in one ear when, there's high traffic, noise volume, which can also be seen as a major safety distraction. And we maybe need to address that. So I guess when it comes to parental liability, the ordinance places liability on patients, but really relies only on warnings for individuals under age 14. So, a legal gap, say a 12-year-old on an electrical scooter causes a multi-car accident by failing to yield. The warning system really does nothing to address this civil liability. So just several comments that I noted reading through this. So truly, if the board's concerned about the safety and noise of ATVs, which were backed by a group willing to accept heavy regulation, why are we now considering a light touch ordinance for these e-bikes that travel up to 28 miles an hour and can be operated by 8-year-olds running around in our village?
So I will just say that the information that you have in front of you, as I said, was a draft. This has been accumulated by several communities throughout the state of Wisconsin following state statutes, as was reference related to the ATVs and UTVs that we were that was brought up to the village following the state statutes.
And Rick, I think there were some questions in there for you as well. Can you please address them?
Right. So I guess I haven't really spent any time digging into the ordinance draft, just waiting to get feedback on if this is something the village board is interested in. We can certainly look into those issues with enforcement, because that's always what we need to think about when we're putting ordinances together, is how we actually can enforce it. Or is it just sort of something that we say don't do, but we don't really have a way of actually stopping people from it? So, if the board wanted us to work on putting an actual like draft together for its future consideration, we can certainly do that. And look at ways that we could maybe tighten it up. And frankly, since we didn't have board direction, we haven't spent a whole lot of time thinking about, what are the, what's our flexibility here to regulate these things as far as like equipment goes and things like that. But we can certainly take a look at that to, try to figure out are we restricted by state law in any way? Or can we be more restrictive in certain aspects as far as what we require? So if we get the direction to do that tonight, or to move forward with some sort of ordinance, we can certainly take a look at those things.
All right, Chris, you have your hand up, and then Pete, I see you.
Pete was first, I believe.
Oh, go ahead.
All right. Well, yeah, I think this is very timely. I mean, these scooters, they're racing around in my neighborhood. I've seen them all over the village. So I think it's an emerging hazard that we really need to take action. I appreciate you guys putting a draft together, and I certainly agree with some of the comments that have been made, particularly, the acknowledgement of potential commercial businesses given the glacial drumlin trail. I think the language is set up well for that. So Heidi, I appreciate your comments on that. I think the timing of this, so that we can do education as far as what the rules are with kids before they break for summer, because these scooters are becoming more and more prevalent, is really key. So I'm 100% aligned with proceeding with this. I guess just some feedback that I had. Under operations on roadways, it talks about that it can be that they can't be operated on roadways with a posted speed limit greater than 25 unless there's a designated. I think there's another piece that you need to cover here, particularly like Highway N, where it turns to 25 all the way down. We don't want scooters on Ns. We don't want scooters on the four-way on BB when it goes to 25. So I don't know how the language needs to be written, but I think that's got to be covered. The way it's covered right here is a little bit generic, and I think there's some exceptions in our village. The other thing and I agree with Heidi in the sense that age limit, 8 to me seems pretty young to be operating an electric scooter in a roadway. I think as I look at other ordinances within the state, I've seen anywhere between 14 and 16. So I mean, I'd leave it up to you guys to dig further and come back with an ordinance, but 8 is way too young to be racing around with these things. I think I like the helmet requirement at 16. I think some of the ordinances have up to 18 years old. So I'd look for you guys to get some best practices. And then I'm not quite sure that a lot of spots it talks about parents or guardians shall not knowingly permit such things from happening. And I don't know what the accountability measure is, because even at the end under penalty, it's not really clear. And I know it's a draft, so I appreciate the draft. I think we need to do it. And I'm not sure what we need in terms of motions. It's a discuss and consider, but I'm 100% for moving forward with a draft with some of the comments that have been made. And I'm sure, Chris, you've got some as well.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I was actually just gonna rescind what I was gonna say. I think Pete said it pretty well.
Yeah, I think tonight the discuss and consider is to give staff direction on whether we want to move forward with an ordinance, and then obviously feedback for what we'd like to see. And I think it sounds like we're interested in an ordinance, and we've given Rick a lot of feedback. So we can formalize that with a motion.
I'll make a motion to give direction to staff to put together a e-bike scooter ordinance with feedback presented at tonight's board meeting.
And I'll second.
All right, motion by Dahl, second by Murphy. Any other discussion or feedback for the team? Otherwise, roll call vote, please.
Benzo,
No.
Dahl,
Aye.
Cal Nelson,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Severson,
Aye.
Stoa? That was an aye, Chris?
Yes. See, that's why I just say yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes. Deer Grove EMS Commission.
All right, we met on Thursday, March 19th at the EMS or ESB building at 6:30 p.m. We did not have any public appearances, approved the minutes. We discussed and considered revision of the minutes from the January meeting, which was a discussion around allowing the chief to use car 79 until the end of its useful life. So that was something that we had offered up to him. We discussed and considered the February financials. We approved the bills. We discussed and considered write-offs and age accounts. There were no hardships. Accounts are fairly stable in terms of age. Staff report we went through, there was no correspondence. There was really no update on the PAA study other than the meetings with the one-on-ones were going on with elected officials. More to come on that. And then we did discuss and consider doing a Deer Grove staff survey. There was a survey done a couple years ago. We looked at those questions. There was one of the board members, Paula, had put together some suggestions, and that was shared with the group. We plan to revisit that, probably not this month. There's a lot going on here as it relates to some of the Deer Grove issues. But we then adjourned, and that was it. Any questions?
All right. If there's no questions, we can move on to landfill. Oh, Renee, you're on mute.
Let me see here. I don't have that pulled up in front of me. We met on, oh, sorry, I just had that pulled up and then I got rid of it. Sorry. If you want to move on to somebody else and then I will come back to you.
Let's pop down to fire and then we'll come back to you. Pete?
All right, we met on Monday, March 23rd at 6:30 in Town Hall. We did not have any public appearances. We approved the minutes, went through the chief's report. We did discuss and consider using funds from Pleasant Springs to cover a fire vent prop. And this fire vent prop is a hydraulic table that allows different angles to simulate roof lines and allow training, sort of what was done on the corner at 101 East Cottage Grove Road. But it allows them to do that continuously instead of waiting for a building that's going to be demolished that gets offered up. So, I mean, I think it was very clear to the commission that it's important for training. Originally, it was going to come out of the association funds. It was $92,000. They had asked if we could go 50-50 and use the Pleasant Springs funds. And I know, Cam, you and I spoke, but I think the commission was aligned. And in light of the Pleasant Springs agreement with the department, that we approved splitting that 50-50. So they went ahead. We have a fire vent prop that should be delivered here shortly. We did talk about update on generator maintenance. It was recently serviced, and there are definitely low hours on it, but it is aged. So at some point, that's going to need to be earmarked for approval. But at this point, no action was taken. We did talk about the town and village ordinances regarding false alarms, which we talked about tonight, and talked about future agenda items. Obviously, having that fire vent prop available for the whole commission to view firsthand in light of the investment and the importance for their training. And then we adjourned. That was it. Any questions?
Well done. Renee, how about we move on to landfill?
Yes. So we met March 23rd at 6 p.m. There were no public appearances. Approval from the previous meeting. Discuss and consider the landfill monitoring bills were approved for both January and February. Recent landfill testing and monitoring results from August through January 2026 gas sampling report, analytical report was approved along with the January 8th groundwater analytical report for monitoring the wells. as well as the January 8th groundwater exceedance report, and we adjourned.
All right, any questions for landfill? How about Parks, Rec and Forestry? Heidi.
Yep, thanks. We met on Thursday, March 26th. We approved the minutes. We talked about mower and slope safety policy, which was brought up as part of the insurance about our safety with our current equipment, that we have kind of restrictions to keep our employees safe of, I believe it's 15 degrees. So wanted to enact, staff felt it was important to have a policy that shows how we're going to maintain those areas moving forward, unless we have equipment that can handle that angle. So that's, I guess, something that we have to think about in the future if we want to be able to maintain these in a different way. Otherwise, staff has the guidance that they need for these areas on how they would maintain, just have it written to make sure all of our staff are safe as they're working out in the field. The Shady Grove Park update, they are currently working out in Shady Grove. Substantial completion is end of May with final completion by June 15th. So that'll be done for the summer. And the Miracle League playground update is still on schedule. So we just, again, went over the ADA parking, the fence around the playground. Anyone that had sponsored equipment can talk to Sean about, you know, what's happening with sponsored equipment from the Dream Park. And then, of course, maintaining the tile wall and honoring all the work that set the stage for such a beautiful park that we have as such a great community asset that really started with that Dream Park and all the work that the people did there. So we just went over that timeline again, and Sean's report and our future agenda items will kind of continue on with the updates of the 2 park projects. And then we adjourned. Our next meeting is April 23rd. Oh, we did have, we will also be talking about a pickleball season for Bakken Park as a result of neighbor comments, you know, that we should establish a season that it wouldn't open until April 1st, until, you know, October 31st or November 15th or whatever the committee is going to talk about that, defining a pickleball season at our next meeting.
Any questions for Parks? All right, let's move on to reports from village officers. Village attorney.
Nothing to report tonight. Thank you.
Village administrator.
Yes, we have a few years of service anniversaries for staff, most notably Lisa Collada, our village clerk. It's a big month for April's a big month for Lisa. April Fool's Day, April 1st is her birthday, and she has her 10-year service anniversary here, and then she also gets to administer an election every April. So cheers to Lisa. But other than that, happy to take any questions from the tracker or report. Thank you.
Assistant Administrator Finance Director Sawyer with a discuss and consider and budget amendments.
All right, so relatively straightforward amendment. Concluding each debt issuance, we have an amendment that trues up because at the time when we approve the budget, we are not approving or we do not estimate debt issuance cost, premium, or anticipated interest on investments, which would be the interest that we hold or that we earn until the funds are drawn upon for eligible project costs. So that's the biggest part of the amendment shown.
at one of the last board meetings, we talked about the Johnson Health Tech trail replacement reduction in overall project costs. I also have included in here favorable bids with the BB bus bike path reduces our obligation by $53,000. Originally, when we discussed the fire and EMS study, we had budgeted for the full cost, which is now budgeted only, or the recommended budget amendment is for the $17,500. And then for the squad that was totaled in 2025, we received those proceeds and put it in equity for the planned replacement in 2026. And this is just reflecting that we will only receive around the $24,348 in 2026 once those final uploading bills are submitted to insurance. So with that said, I'll take any questions.
So Cam, is this essentially a $1.2 million amendment to the budget?
Are you talking about
when I add up approximately when I add up the changes, $1.2 million difference from budget to amendment?
Yeah, so difference might not be necessarily apples to apples here. So like here, like proceeds is going down, so it's a negative change. So like whereas a positive change for debt issuance costs is a plus. So if you're talking about like net effect on the budget, overall it's a net positive effect. And we could go kind of fund by fund. Because ultimately we're reducing project cost in here, and then the premium on debt issuance offsets largely the debt issuance cost.
Okay, I see that now. So like premium on debt, we had nothing, but then we're getting 614. Just in terms of the total cash. So it's plus 1.2, give or take. Gotcha.
Correct. Yep.
I gotcha.
Other questions for Cameron?
Make the motion to approve the budget amendment 2026-002.
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Murphy, second by Dahl. Any other discussion? All right, so we'll do a roll call.
Benzo.
You're on mute.
No.
Dahl.
Aye.
Kel Nelson.
Aye.
Murphy.
Aye.
Severson.
Aye.
Stoa.
Yes.
All right, but motion passes. D, police chief. We have discussed and consider options for video documentation of the police station project.
So what you have in front of you is related to the construction project of the building and options for documentation purposes, the process for historical purposes, and also as a way of documenting any matters that may come up during the construction phases that may need to be addressed. The proposals that you have in front of you, one was received through a company that Riley Construction has utilized before. The second option is a business that the village has used on prior occasions. And then third option is internal staff. Again, just seeing where the board sits and if you'd wish to proceed.
Open it up to comments or questions from the board for some direction.
I guess my question, Chief, is, if there's something needed for construction, I would have thought that would have been part of Riley's bid, et cetera. It's not budgeted. I'm struggling a little bit understanding the purpose. I don't know if I'm missing something.
again, it's like I said, partially the historical records for you, the process for the future. It's also to be able to provide out to the community as the process is going. So some would refer to it as a time lapse. Again, it was not thought of during the initial.
Understood.
So you're right. That's why it was not through Riley initially.
Well,
change order.
Certainly.
Change order. Sorry.
No, certainly. Option one. I mean, I unless there's a solid reason why we would need that high definition and some of those things in terms of making sure we do it right. I understand, wanting some historical, progression photos. I mean, I would lean towards if we could have staff do it. Otherwise, certainly the question would be is if we went with option two, how would we fund that? I mean, obviously it's not a lot of money, but death by 1,000 cuts. We just got to stop digging into, these nice to haves until we kind of right the ship.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Pete, just to kind of to anchor on that. So that's exactly why it wasn't part of the original police station project. We were asked to reduce cost as anywhere possible. So really though, we didn't want to be as staff the ones responsible for saying no. We weren't going to do a time lapse or historical or have this kind of showcase of the project as it progresses. So that's why when Riley had brought it up, it kind of had us thinking again, oh, well, we should at least check with the board to see what the pulse is, if that's something that the board is interested in. If the board's not interested in, it is, yes, a way to minimize costs.
Heidi, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering if I think because of staff change, maybe in our media, then we lost the person that was credentialed to fly the drone. Am I remembering that correctly? I mean, you need to take a test and be certified to fly our drone. I was just wondering if we have a timeline that maybe we could designate someone that might be able to do that instead of spending. I know it takes a little time to study and you have to know all these FAA regulations and things, but it's it's possible.
We passed in the budget process for for two people to get certified. So Sean's one of those individuals. We just, regardless of what goes forward from a videography or picture perspective, there will be cameras on the work site. So obviously we can do our own investigation, to make sure that there aren't any issues, and our kind of way to have eyes on the site at any given time, so we can kind of independently review the progression as it's going on to make sure it's lining up with pay requests. So that will happen. I think really the ask here, what's in front of the board, is do you want a professional firm or individual responsible, or is something that staff does sufficient? So obviously the quality is going to significantly vary depending on who's doing it. The cameras that are going to be used for the site historically have 30-day memory on them. We can extend that at minimum cost, but it's just things that somebody has to actively be making sure they're downloading the footage, and we have the right angles and such.
Chris.
Yeah, I think we should just go with staff on this. I don't think the cost for this is worth paying for when we have staff that could do it a sufficient job.
Other comments?
Yeah, I remembered to unmute myself when my hand is raised. I agree with Chris and Heidi that we have staff who are able to do it, and that item was not budgeted. So I'm wondering, I don't know if I missed this piece at all, Chief Gary. So when were you approached by a vendor to do this, or was that, can you fill me in on that gap?
The discussion came up with Riley Construction and documentation of the construction phase after they were awarded the bid. So that's where we then got the information related to the vendor that they had previously used. And then I reached out to the village's prior business that they had used. And then again, I have staff that are working on their drone license also. So again, if we're doing it internally, I have no problem with that decision by the board whatsoever.
Good, because
This is
it just
just again bringing it to use to see where the board, what the board felt about it.
great. Thank you for that. I just think this is another clear example of a salesman prompting Riley or whomever when we have adequate staff who can do this. So thank you.
And then can you just clarify that? Do we have someone that can operate a drone now, or they're still in the works? Like, the idea is to get drone footage on a monthly basis to capture it. It's the first time we've done a facility in 35 years. So for historical documentations, that's the idea behind it. But are we going to miss out on several months of construction because we're getting our license, or how does that work?
I do not currently have anybody that has their drone license. Hopefully, I don't have in a specific time frame when they will. I know they're adamantly working on it, so hopefully they'll be up and running here sooner than later.
Any idea what sooner versus later is? You know, the one thing is, it's like, I think in retrospect, you can never go back and take these pictures. So I understand that there's definitely some, you know, it's the biggest project we've taken on in probably the history of Cottage Grove. It is the biggest project. So to get some quality shots, if we don't have someone to operate a drone, I'm wondering if, you know, Robert Bartera Photography is a local Cottage Grove business, and he does extremely good work. And I'm just wondering if maybe there's a split there. If we're going to have our own drone operator, maybe we could pare down his scope and he could do them until we can do them. It's just a thought.
I'm also happy to donate my stipend to cover the cost of this. I think it's an important documentation.
I tried to get my husband to volunteer. He has his drone license, but said he didn't have a lot of time to do extras.
Can we
I can
borrow
still
the
work
ladder
on it.
truck?
I'll donate my stipend too. Smaller. But I think it's important.
I mean, I think
Cindy,
that
I agree with you.
I think that going with a local photographer and having it done well does a small, tiny service to the project, and so I'd be happy to contribute to that and not use village funds in that capacity.
Rick, I guess just procedurally, is this something that obviously if Cindy and Pete want to cover, what does that look like on the village side?
As far as accounting, I don't know.
Well,
Like
I
yeah.
can handle the accounting. If it's just a payroll deduction, that's pretty easy. I can work with them, but I just want to make sure if we are
So
moving forward.
oddly enough, there's like a specific provision. I don't remember what it says about, like, because sometimes officials just say they're not going to accept their salary, but that sort of has to be like before the year or something like that. So basically, like, it would have to come back as like a check to the village or something like that, rather than a deduction.
Okay.
Like a donation.
I can write a check to the village. I can bring it there tomorrow. How about that?
You're talking about the Bob Bertera.
Yep, that's.
I'm with you, Cindy. I'll go 50-50. I'll go 50-50 with you.
Okay. I'll make a motion to use Robert Terra as the vendor for the photographic video documentation of the police station project.
With Cindy and Pete splitting the cost 50-50. Yep. I'll second that motion.
All right. Motion by Kelm Nelson, second by Dahl. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Roll call, I suppose.
Oh.
Sorry. We're roll call. We're online.
All right, Benzo?
Thank you, Cindy and Pete, for donating for that. Aye.
Stoll,
Aye.
Kel Nelson,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Severson,
Aye.
Stoa,
Yes.
All right. Motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.
So Cam, if you could just email me how or what the check should look like, just so I know.
Yep.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Moving on to communication and miscellaneous business. We're almost done. Consider approval of vouchers. Bills list is in the agenda. Comments or questions for Cameron?
Oh boy. Cam, we didn't have a chance to talk about it. I did have a few questions.
Not a problem. I do want to make one comment. We did renegotiate our internet bill here at Village Hall. So there will be, roughly about $150 a month savings on that bill. It might be a little bit, that savings might be a little bit deferred on when exactly it starts, but just wanted to kind of mention as follow-up from a previous bills listing, we are still looking at the Alliant bills as far as per meter basis, as opposed to reducing the amount of meters at MSB into 1 meter, which would involve some rewiring of the master panel. So then eventually the board could make a decision about if that rewiring is worth the cost of compared to the monthly fixed charges at the MSB building.
Nice work on that, Cam. I mean, it's just these little things, just a little here, a little there, and it makes a difference, right? So I did have a question. I wasn't quite sure on page 1 under Curico Aquatic Resources management agreement. What are they managing?
Sean, do you want to take that one if you're still on?
You betcha. Pete, what we get a 4-month management agreement that we set up with Carico, and what they do is they provide us with guidance and 24/7 support should we need anything quickly with the splash pad. They come out monthly and do testing and just make sure that we're following all of the regs that are needed.
Okay, so that's a splash pad maintenance thing, and that's not anything that we can do internally?
Not to get the breaks that we get on the pricing for chemicals and have their expertise. No.
Okay, gotcha. Even the next line item, Radke vest. I'm assuming that's bulletproof vest. I thought we bought a bunch of bulletproof vests last month. Is that what that is? $2,600?
Gary, if you're on the.
Yes, those are best for the 2 that are in the academy right now.
Okay, gotcha. All right, let's see. Then the other question was, so when we do events, it's really cool that we do this. So like the pasta classes, Claire did these classes. So we pay Claire. Is that, there's fees to participate, right? So how does that work?
So yeah, we pay Claire for her services. That is basically a money in, money out transaction. So the participants register through us, and then we contract the service out to Claire.
Gotcha. Under ground force solutions, so the excavating work at 101 East Cottage Grove Road. So it was $9,300 to grade that out and seed and put straw down. Wow.
Correct.
Wow.
Yep.
And I see that was charged to TID 9509.
Yeah, that was at either last meeting or the meeting before, Kyla. So there was a couple of bids that were brought forward. So the Ground Force Solutions LLC was the cheapest of the solutions. So we felt, when that was presented, we just felt like cleaning up that corner and grading it, just because of the visibility of that corner was important to be professionally done.
Yeah, it looks good. It looks a heck of a lot better than it did. When the grass grows, it will, but it's crazy what a little bit of grass seed costs. And I know there was some grading, etc. Then the last question I had was tree work. So there was a tree removal for about $4,000. It was $3,950. Was that for trees there along the new path? Where was that? I'm just curious.
You again.
Yeah, hang on one second, Pete. Let me catch up here.
Page
Um,
6 towards the bottom, tree
yep.
works.
I'd have to look up no, that was not for along the BB path at all. No, that was a removal that was too big for us to handle in-house.
Okay, because no, that was my other question is could we have done that in-house, but you just answered that. So that's all the questions I had.
Other questions on the bills list?
Would make the motion to approve the vouchers as presented.
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Murphy, second by Dahl. Ask once again, any other questions? Otherwise, we'll do roll call.
Benzo,
Aye.
Dahl,
Aye.
Kel Nelson,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Severson,
Aye.
Stoa.
Yes.
Right. Moving on to correspondence. Anyone have anything? All right. Upcoming community events. Hopefully everyone is signed up for the newsletter because there was a special sustainability issue that went out, I think last night or yesterday, which has all of the things that are happening in April and sustainability wise throughout the village. Otherwise, who has other things to add?
I'll just put a plug in. National Drug Take Back Day is April 25th. We'll be holding the usual collection here at the MSD building with drive-through service. So anybody who needs to get rid of unused medications, don't hesitate to come on by and drop them on off, and we'll get rid of them for you.
E-cycle event is April 18th from 8 until noon. Come and drop your electronic recycling off. I will be there as one of the people collecting the waste, and hopefully we can make the event successful again and keep that stuff out of our landfills.
That's a great Earth Day event. Thank you, Cam.
Anything else? Otherwise, future agenda items.
Baker Tilly will be here on May 4th to present their audit results and answer any questions on the financial statements.
The comprehensive plan interviews will also be on May 4th.
There's a professor that I met at a conference that has offered to provide some orientation related training for he does that for new boards for free. So something to add to our orientation process. So we'd look, depending on the time that he would be looking to do that, we could time it for a lesser agenda or maybe a special meeting, but might be something good for everyone to attend versus only potential new board members. But something to look forward to ahead, if not in May, maybe in June.
And then everybody's favorite topic, budget. Because the second meeting in April falls before the new board starts, the first meeting in May will be the budget timeline, the capital prioritization process, and then possibly mission, vision, value consideration. Just again, depending. So what will be in front of the board will be what is currently in place. So I'll likely send an email out this week of what the current guidelines are and full timeline. So certainly I can collect feedback between now and May 4th on the process.
All right, otherwise we can move to number 11.
Make the motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Murphy, second by Dahl, non-debatable, and I don't think we need a roll call. All those in
Aye.
favor? Aye. All right, thanks everyone.
Have a good night.
You too.